behind that, some sort of a cult fucking tournament. I don't know. I never investigated that. Maybe I'll look into that later. Right, now we're ready for the show. So we've got Harry here, who is a commentator, does loads of stuff now. I noticed those Blast guys don't fuck with you. Don't know why that is. And they never even inquired. Mate, they hire everyone to be casting up. Dude, I've had so much trouble getting Mauisnake on desks. Next thing I know, it's like I turn around, he's fucking casting with Anders. It's like, who do you have to kill to get on there, mate? What's going on? At least you're on ESL now. At least you're on the big show.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like we did. Me and Hugo did Blast Moscow, but that was like the only. I don't know if we just did a really. I just don't know if we did like a really shit job or something. But like they.
You didn't like hold a door open for a YouTuber or something, did you? Yeah. What's going on?
Well, hang on. That was the event, right? That guy like stuck into, bro. Yeah, what the fuck.
And sadly, by the way, if people don't know, if you have the balls, you could do that at a lot of esports tournaments. I'm guarantee you, because those dog guys don't know esports. They'll just let you in. They'll go, oh, he seems to know it. Seems to better let him back. I'm surprised that hasn't happened at real tournaments, dude.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, I've even had it where, like, you know, you get part, like, if you like forget your badge or whatever, you just
exactly.
Work your way in.
If you're rushing, if you're on a rush to get to the stage and you just go, look, I have to get up there right now, they're gonna let you through instantly, aren't they? They're not going to say like, show me papers. Well, at least not a few years ago, anyway. I mean, that used to be a joke. That line, that game papers, please, seemed hilarious. Note back in the day. Now it's almost like a sinister forebearing of what life's going to become. Right, obviously we've got Nohte here as well, who used to work for Dust2 US, which if people don't know, even though it has a totally different name, was sort of like a HLTV specifically for the NA region. Obviously, had even like a similar skinned element of it, and then basically they built it up, and he was one of the few people who sort of like. I guess in his scenario, it was like fucking the Dark Knight Rises, wasn't it? As they all just capsized and no one cared about them because no one cares about NA. He was like, well, there must be one in the wreckage to fire Rises, brother. And then Nohte just like fucking parasailed out there and went to HLTV.org, got like fucking legit, got verified, everything. All right, mate. It's not bad. Working for HLTV.org.
It's not bad. I was working for both for about 2 years. And then I was like, I guess I'm out. Hop onto the European train, I guess.
Here's the thing. People think I hate HLTV.org. Not true. I hate just most of the people who founded and managed it and probably still have ownership stake in it to this day. But that's why I want Nohte to work there. I want to gradually bring in like some legit people who I don't have to hate, who can just do normal journalism, don't even have to lie, don't even have to basically do, like it luckily he doesn't even work there anymore, so I can say this. Don't have to be like Mira and be like, so what if someone technically is on the board of Astralis and owns a percent? It's only like 2.4%. It's like, can I have 2.4% of you shutting the fuck up? What are you talking about? So, and then he goes, all right, well, I've put this disclaimer up. What, after the fact? Should I get a time machine and go back? What are you talking about, you idiot? And then he's just going, look, I promise that there's no conflict of interest. Like, that isn't how it works, Mira. That's not the way it works. If there's conflict of interest, it's a conflict of interest. Like, I can't just go, well, I'll take that to the bank and cash it. There we go. And now the joke is he just works for Deserto, doesn't he? Like, what's it all about? Just jump to an actual clickbait site. That's right. Listen, Richard Lewis isn't clickbait. Deserto, he'd even admit the clickbait like motherfuckers, aren't they? I know, I used to be there. They used to be clickbaiting my shit. Don't ever clickbait my shit, motherfucker. How dare you? Anyway. Let's get into this episode. I actually thought that was a springboard, what I sort of joked about at the beginning there, Harry. Because one thing I want to ask you was this. This is going to be a sensitive topic. Because the major's coming up, right? And technically, especially publicly, nobody knows who will be hired as talent for the major. Nobody knows. And I actually have to say, of all the majors in history, this is the most up in the air. Because first of all, PGL's only ever run one major. And it was a long time ago. So some of that talent isn't even around in the game anymore. Then secondly, we've had this whole period, while it's the online period, where some of the old names have sort of faded. Some of the newer names, yourself included, have been able to really come to the fore and done loads of work. And then thirdly, normally when it's not a major, actually most companies already have pre-existing relationships and then they tend to just exploit that. So the same people, just like you work with ESL, and as always is on Blast. And then if it was like, actually on PGL, I often get the invite. In fact, people who don't even do cast anymore, Nohte sometimes gets an invite, even though he's sort of like been out of the game for a while. Because again, pre-existing relationships. The problem is it's the middle issue that I want to talk to you about, which is the fact that when you look for who's being hired, I have a very unique perspective on this. Technically, as like, you know, an independent company, it's totally up to BGL who they hire. Like, if they could hire in theory, nobody legit. I mean, if you remember Starlad, this is real if you remember, had all those like PUBG observers for the first week that were just like missing all the fucking kills, which did spawn the most hilarious parody video ever. When someone took all the greatest moments in CSGO history, like, you know, like Snack sneaking up the stairs at Katowice, but he just did it like if the Starlad observers were doing it, and it was like, instead, you know, like the camera was in like Palace callous. It missed all the kills. It was the kill feed. Oh, it was amazing. It was fair. But the point is, it's up to you technically who you hire. But the problem I have is this. I think personally, it's just my own perspective. I think for majors, it should sort of be like a stamp of approval of like, you did the best work recently and you're number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3. So in my opinion, if you have 5 spots for casters, should be the best 5 casters. I know that, listen, again, to some people, that's a quaint opinion. The reason I say this, Harry, is this. I want to get your perspective as someone who doesn't know if he's going to be hired for the event yet. I want to get your take on this. Like, do you feel as though, for example, people like you who are newer people, do you feel like you've got to the point now you should be on a major, you should be getting hired for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't know, because it's one of these things where, like, I get that, like, on paper, haven't done a tremendous amount of LAN work, but I get that, like, if you look back at the recent kind of context of why I haven't done any LAN work,
true.
It's like this whole thing where, I physically couldn't get the experience because there weren't LAN events. I don't know. I think that, like, me and Hugo as a duo have come a really long way in the last few years, right? Like, I don't think we had a lot of identity before. I don't think, like, I mean, Thorin, man, you knew what I was like. I was very, like, nervous and shy and was kind of, like, afraid to really, like, you were one of the only people who would just sit there and be like, look, man, like, just fucking, don't be afraid to kind of just, I remember doing, I think it was the PGL minors with you and Red Eye.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Like, fucking 2016, 17? 17, that's the one.
Yeah, that's it.
Man, that was like one of my first events, and I remember you and him both said, like, because we were trying to have banter on the desk, and Red Eye goes like, look, when Thorin is having banter with you, like, say something back. Don't just like sit there and take it. But that was very much like who I was, because I wasn't feeling like confident on camera or on a broadcast yet. And it took a long time to like move past that. But I think in the last few years, especially since COVID happened, like me and Hugo, even though it was a lot of work and like, we did loads, and I'm very, very grateful for that. We also kind of gave up a fair bit. Like, we lived out in Germany for like the entire year, just in one house the whole time.
Man, what a sacrifice. Germany. Yeah.
Well, no, but like, if I wanted to get like really real with it, if I want to get like really real, which maybe this is a little heavy for a podcast, but like I had a family member pass away during everything, like while we were out there. But like, I just, I wanted to keep doing all the work I'd signed on to. And like, so that was kind of
dedication.
Like,
hard.
That was kind of haunting. So it was like, in a way, it felt like, at least personally, like we'd put quite a lot into trying to do a good job and like make all this happen. And so it would be nice to think that at the end of that, there's some like tangible reward, right? Like the major is the goal for everyone. And I'm sure like you can relate to this, like for players, talent, everyone, man. Everyone wants to go and do a major in some way. And that's very much my goal. Like I don't want to be one of the people who's just like, yeah, he's a nice guy to have on. Like maybe we can get him for some B and C stream work, like have him talk for that. And then when the important games roll around, that's when we give it to the others. Like I don't know, I always think that when like you're trying to benchmark like the new age talent or whatever, like the COVID age talent, I guess, like me, Hugo, Connor Launders as well. Like whenever you look at these guys, it's very easy to go, well, they don't sound anywhere near as hype as some of the classic, Sadakist and Anders moments. But it's like, mate, they were in an arena with full of people. You know what it's like working in an arena, man. It's like such a rush, and it feels almost easier in a way because like the crowd are kind of, they direct a lot of the flow as well as like you responding to that. It's a super unique feeling, and it's something I want to do a lot more. But like I want to show what we can do in a big LAN, and a part of me was hoping that the major was going to be it, like especially because we have been on all these main events and like doing all the big shit, but so far I still haven't heard anything, and considering it's in a month, that's probably not the best of signs.
Well, I will say I believe that they held up the talent aspect because like they were still figuring out.
Well, obviously they didn't know where it was even going to be.
As far as I know, like I can't say it, but I don't think everyone's necessarily finished being hired or whatever. Yeah. Like I think there's still some wiggle room there maybe. But yeah, obviously, listen, I totally relate to the fact because unless you're basically like the guy, like I'm sure, for example, if ESL Rio would happen, you'd almost be a shoo-in for that one. Unless you basically have like a super deep one of those relationships with the orgs, no one ever knows. Like it's why actually it's very unique to CSGO, by the way. I know when I publicly said like a couple of years ago when all that drama came out, like Starladder was paying late, and I was like, you are aware, like we won't say the name because we don't want to fuck Harry up here, but certain big TOs, they also pay late, and everyone was going like, really? And then when I pointed out, and most of us don't even have contracts because we almost never have contracts, there was all people from like tier 2 games like Rocket League going, this isn't true, everyone has contracts. I was like, you work in fucking Rocket League, you idiot, what do you know? So basically CSGO is way more amateurish than people think. Like I've even been hired 3 weeks before a massive event, and it's like, mate, that's so mental that you just assume I'm available. I am, but 1K rate or whatever, like, yeah, no, dude, that's what it's like. So actually I wanted to get your take on this, Nohte, as like sort of a neutral observer, but I'm sure you have some friends who work as talent and stuff, right? What do you think on this angle? Like, you don't have to agree with me. Like, I might just be a romantic. Like, I am a bit of sort of like a purist, and I try to just go for like strict ideas. I know there's business considerations, and technically, by the way, like one of the angles that will make this a difficult decision as to who to hire is like part of you, even if they on Reddit don't like him, I'm sure every casual fan does still want Anders there, no matter whether he's in a duo or not. It's just important for them to be there for, the most casual fan ever. What do you think from the outside? Like, what's your perspective on like talent hires, what they should do for the major? The angle, like we said, obviously there's been a massive turnover the last 2 years, but it was all these online tournaments. What's your perspective?
I think there's just so many like people in the talent pool at this point where for the majors you just have to hire the probably like best 5-6 people for casting and then the top 3 analysts. Like right now Maniac 100% should be as one of the analysts.
Absolutely.
on a desk. Sponge, Machine, that duo, like a lot of these it just doesn't make sense because I think the last 3 or 4 majors haven't had like the best pool of talent for every single role there's really no excuse to not have that at this point. Like I think also, to your point, like a lot of people don't really scout new talent either. Like it had to be where you hired 4 new people for Flashpoint before anybody was willing to take a chance on half of these people. And with that, like you're never going to be able to find these new people. Like Mauisnake should have been on tier 1 desks a year and a half ago, I think. Just from talking to him, like he should have been able to get any of these roles. So the fact that he's now on Blast is also just in general a good innovation. But yeah, I think the way that talent hires are handled nowadays just seems like it's really, I don't want to say poorly done, but it's just like there's no path up for a lot of people, and this is from talking to even people at Philadelphia who have been casting in North America for the last 5 years, right? Like some of these people should have had a chance to cast some of these lands at this point, even whether it be like the smaller DreamHack ones that happened before. But I've talked to multiple casters who just don't even get that call up because they're just hiring the same people. So I think A, there's no path up, but B, also like there's no chain that anybody can really tell like how to make it to the top at this point, right?
Yes.
So I think it's just the overall flow of it isn't well put together.
I'll pick up on the last thing you said there, because actually the idea of like, what is the formula for success, basically? The problem is that's actually ever changing. Like, obviously, for example, no one can go back in time and be Anders and just do a bunch of online tournaments, but then they'll spin in to be the main person in the game, and then you eventually get online. It's like, no one could do that. Like, that doesn't exist as a path. But at the same time, like, the path that Harry took, for example, that didn't exist. Like, I've said this straight up on loads of shows. I told people like Harry and Hugo and Scrawny and Lorne, like, look, this is brutal, but you'll never make it if you're the B stream caster, because the problem is no one watches the B stream, and basically as a result you can sort of never get that hype. Like, you're never really going to get the Reddit thread, like Reddit appreciation, because no one watches that fucking game. It's like they put the boring game on then. And then the other thing is, back in the day, the TO would almost like actually themselves stratify you and typecast you like that. Like, in their mind it was like, oh, I'll hire you, not for the major of course, I'll just hire you for this event as the B stream guy. You get like God knows what, like €300 a day or something, and then even if you're really good, the problem is, how does that guy in his mind ever decide you get to go up in that scenario? Like, basically, one of the weird things about the way the talent's seen, and I'm sort of dropping some gems here, is at the time that there was the unbreakable 3 trios, Anders and Semler, Henry and Sado, and Bardolph and DDK. At the time, right, loads of people were depressed. They were like, there's 3 of them. You can never break through. Always be. But what they didn't know was this. Just like in player turnover, eventually one duo is going to break up. One duo is going to have a fight with this TO. One duo is going to ask for too much for one event and push the limit. And then what's going to happen then is they're going to give Harry and Hugo a try. And then if they do well, they get another event. Scrawny and Launders, maybe they go with that angle to be, I think for Blast angle, I had the vibe that they were trying to like groom a new set of people that had never been the tier 1, and so it could be their tier 1. I think they've done a very good job with that. Like, you do associate with them with Blast. That's why they do all the shoulder content as well. I mean, even though I have to say, listen, I actually don't mind that Maniac thing where they put the stickers on the gun or whatever, all the Maniac. Are you really going to put the fucking Boston Majors sticker on Carrigan's gun? Shall I just find the worst moment of your life and then just celebrate that? What the fuck are you talking about? So, and then the other one was, like, I can handle that show though, right? Because like, Maniac's so smooth, he weaves it in to make it seem like you're not just watching stickers be put on a gun and pretending it's This Is Your Life or something, which only Harry will get the reference to. But worse than that, right? It's when they do that feature, listen, Scrawny, I love you. But that feature where it's like, you're just talking about skins. It's like, oh, I can't handle it, mate. Like, because the problem is I'm trying to get into it. Like, I know Harry knows about skins. I don't know fuck all about skins.
No,
though, so I'm just watching it like, what are they talking? They're talking like this is like they're talking like this is a Rembrandt. They're pulling out of the, oh, look at this incredible. Like, what are you talking about? The finish and that, you know.
So, dude, that's one of the things that's funny about Connor. Like, I don't know. Skins are pretty, but that's really where like my knowledge of them stops.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I go, oh, that's a nice one. Oh, that's kind of nice. But like, fuck, Connor is researched to the nines.
He goes balls deep,
like
doesn't he?
skin of like I remember I put out because he was bigging up the Talon knife, which is basically like, you know, just if you're not super into skins, it's like the shitty Karambit, like the newer Karambit that came out, and he was putting out tweets saying it's better than the Karambit, and I just said like lol, you know, like no, and I thought that would kind of be it, but then he comes in with like this minute-long video of him like, let me tell you why you're wrong, and then he's like, the Talon knife has an infinite loop inspect animation. That and I already don't know what this is.
I know exactly. Sounds slick as fuck though, doesn't it?
No, exactly right. And he's like listing off all these points. You know, it is like a crazy amount of research, and it's not like an idea that like Blast went, oh yeah, look, we need to do something involving skins, you know, like, oh, let's just give that to Connor. No, it was very much the other way around, like Connor being super into skins and going to Blast and going, shit man, like let me make you this segment, let me do this thing where I, you know, because obviously some people are really into skins, right? Like you got all like the skin traders and stuff, like spending crazy money on like rare patterns or whatever. So he was super keen to do it, and it was kind of like his whole thing that he helped, you know, build up. And I think like the passion of his really does come across when you get him on there and he's like bringing out some AK that you've never seen before, and he's going, oh well, take a look at how this sticker placement goes right here. I don't know, man, I don't know how he can do it, but like I find it kind of interesting just because of like the level of knowledge someone has about something that to me is like so like just in the background of the game.
Mega niche,
you know what I mean? Like, yeah. But
what do you think about the angle I said though? Like as I said, I mean, you yourself, obviously, you had to pioneer it. How does someone get off the B string? Because I've heard many people ask me that question. Dude, obviously, I don't know because I've never seen it done. But you two and Scrawny Aloners did it.
Yeah, it's really weird, man. It's like a mixture of, well, like I'm going to talk about like two things here, I reckon. So let's just right. So like, firstly, it's a little bit fucked because it's like it is a great deal luck as well as ability. Like for me, I always look at like something that gave me a big leg up was obviously when Sadakist got banned and got taken off of like all those events. They needed someone to try and cast.
Yeah, that's a fucking butterfly effect moment affecting your career. Holy shit.
Yeah, right, exactly.
All right, fair enough.
And like that happened there. And so it was like, oh yeah, dude, like go cast these events with Henry. And so suddenly it's almost like, you know, like with like NIP where they bring up like one of their children from like the
youth team,
really,
yeah. I know what you mean. I know you meant the youth.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. They bring
not one of their children. They definitely don't bring up children at any point. You know, just to clarify. Just to clarify, just my youngsters. Yeah, exactly. We get you.
Yeah, but like, so they put them in with like a bunch of experienced people, and like even if they don't stay there forever, it's this idea of like you kind of drip feed that like knowledge back in, right? Or like always what we used to say about like the Asian region and like majors, we would say, oh, when they come over, you know, even if they don't do well, even if they get bodied and just reamed out, they go back and they take a loads of experience with them. That's kind of what it felt like, was like suddenly I got to go amongst all these legends who had like been doing it forever, who like I'd always looked up to as like, wow, you know, these guys are the voices of Counter-Strike. And then I got to go do all these events with them, and like suddenly I was like, oh shit, like, you know, there's a lot I can learn from this. You know, Henry was great for that as well. Like Henry's someone who will be very plain and like blunt if he has to be, but not in like a horrible way, in like a way where he's just not gonna, I know so many people, whenever I try to ask for like feedback or whatever, they almost like sugarcoat it to the point where it's not even useful anymore, or you just get some response like, nah man, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing
I'll
great.
tell you why that is
doesn't
though.
Actually help, you know.
I'll actually give you the perspective. Here's the problem with that question, right? Is you might mean it earnestly, and most people do. Like they in theory do want feedback, but there's two problems, Harry. One is that sometimes when people say that, they actually say it because they think they're really good now.
Yeah,
so
and they think really you're going to listen to it. They want you. They want you to just tell them they're brilliant. And so the problem is when someone really says I have feedback, that really translates to like, what am I bad at? And so the problem is as well,
even just people that you think can take it, sometimes you tell them the truth and just like, listen, I've got problems with this. Sometimes you might say, by the way, your co-caster's shit, you should probably fire him, that hurts the people's feelings. And the problem is, it's basically like, here's the analogy. It's like if your girlfriend goes, what do you think of this dress? It's like, there's no right answer, is there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no right answer. Because, for example, what if you even say it looks brilliant? And you go, well, I think it looks terrible on me and I think I'm fat. Like, how fucking dare you? So you're just lying. You can't win. You can't. So in that scenario, like you say, they just go, you'll figure it out. You're doing a good job. Like, there's some bullshit, of course.
That is very true. I remember as well, like, because one of the things I was never good at back then was like, because I was very, very nervous. I always made Henry take like the throws and the pickups whenever you'd come back from break or whatever. And then like we were on like our second event together and he just goes like, I'm not doing that for you anymore. Like you're not going to learn if I just keep doing it because you're uncomfortable. And so he was like, look, just do it. And I did it and I fucked it up the first time. And I'm pretty sure I fucked it up the second. And I remember one afterwards, he took me to one side and he was like, look, you threw me under the bus there by like, I did like an exit, like an outro, and then I kind of like asked a question to Henry because I started panicking about like, have I fucked this up? And so like really quickly he just comes back in and goes, oh yeah, now we're going to break, and then he said like, that sounded shit, and that was your fault, and I was just like, yeah, fair enough, it was, but it's almost like I don't know if you saw that clip that like blew up recently of that. I don't watch American football, but it's like that guy who I guess used to play for a college team getting like yelled at by his coach.
Oh yeah, just the other day.
Exactly. He got like an unsportsmanlike conduct or whatever, and it gave up some points. And like the coach is like going ballistic, and everyone's saying like, "Hey, this coach is fucking."
Yeah, they're going. But they were getting like, it's too mean, isn't he? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think that like, no, if you're actually passionate about something, and you actually want to get better. Someone like just kind of talking to you and going, "Mate, you have completely fucked this, and this, and like this needs to be," that should spur you on to want to get better and not just crumble down and go, "Oh my god, I thought I was the best." Like I don't know. I was never under this illusion that I was like some gift to casting. If anything, I thought I had a pretty shit voice for it in the beginning, and I'm not very good with like getting words out. I was really nervous, so I used to like stutter a lot on things. But it's all just things I tried to like work through and get better at, And then like getting to go work with those guys was brilliant. And obviously then that gave me like this huge leg up because suddenly I've done all like these ESL tier 1 events. It became a bit of an easier sell to be like, oh yeah, get me and Hugo, because I just went and did IEM Sydney. Then I went and did like Pro League finals out in Dallas, Texas. And like suddenly I had all this stuff that I could say, look, I didn't shit the bed here. Like, so please put me on your DreamHack. And like, luckily enough, though, DreamHack are another like group of people that were always better at that. I found like, with bringing up talent, at least that's the experience I've had. Like a lot of the teams I've worked with at DreamHack, when you look at what they went on to do, I'm talking people like Vincent Dust, for example. Obviously, like that's been like a nice reoccurring source for these guys to still have work. Fucking
started.
Yeah, Lorna's a scrawny. Suden, like Blair, he does loads of DreamHack stuff, and like they were always very keen to push him there. I think they've been good at like developing this kind of, like not just the main 3 that there were back in the past in terms of casters, and not like the same faces on desks all the time. Even looking at people like Frankie, like she did DreamHack stuff early on.
They've made mistakes. No one's perfect.
But it's like, like now
just don't answer that. Keep going. Exactly.
But yeah, no, man. There's just a lot of people that came from there that have gone on to be like these really solid pieces. So I look at them as like a TO that was always good at developing that up and coming talent, and it was
definitely
always kind of pride to go do a DreamHack.
Look, no, that's the initial first stage. Yeah, you want that start. I will say it does just help that they didn't pay the top rate, so none of us would work those events. It's beneath in many ways.
I have a question for you, Harry. When you used to work on the B stream, you don't get like the same production support as the people on the A stream do.
Oh, bro, no, yeah, you don't really get anything like what the people on the mainstream get. Like it's very, very different. You get less money. Normally you work longer hours. Normally you don't have a desk a lot of the time, right? Like that's something that like is changing somewhat now, but even then not all the time.
Sometimes you don't even go on camera, right? Sometimes they'll just have you in a room, maybe you don't even get a camera shot.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think now more often than not, actually, what ends up happening is like the V-Stream guys normally are also the analysts and hosts, and it's like it's like a very watered down desk segment. It's not like some, like what you guys would do, where like, you sit there and you break a game down for 15, 20 minutes and like go really in depth. It's more like 5-10 minutes, like give your thoughts. But even then, that is still extra work that you're doing on top of probably already working a longer day, like. The B stream's weird because it is like a real like if you looked at it from like through the traditional lenses of work, you'd think the people working more hours in maybe like worse conditions would be getting more money, but it's like no, they often get way less and end up covering a lot more. But then again, like they're not as established, they're not as like a bigger brand name, so it all makes sense in that sense. But yeah. I don't know, man. B-Stream life is weird because it feels like you're so close to making it, and yet at the same time, like the divide never feels more apparent than when you're looking onward at like these people who show up for 3 hours and they have like a desk to go and take it in the halftime. Oh, sorry, in like the in between maps, and you get a bit of time off, and then you have like all these resources available to you. Like you don't get any of that, so it is kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, to your point earlier with working in an arena and even working with proper production, like all of these V-Stream casters don't have replays, they don't have like cameras.
Sometimes they're remote as well. They're not in the venue.
They don't even have observers.
The game to the same level. Yeah, how are you supposed to even hype the game to the same level at that point?
By the way, I thought since earlier you actually just listed some names. No, I'll give some of my own because here's the thing.
Yeah.
Obviously I don't know who they'll hire entirely. Like I've given my thoughts as to who I think was legit, but it's just advice. It's up to them who they pick as their event. But I'll say this. Because I've been basically, the point I brought up that there's been the turnover, I've been really umming and ahhing over how to do this. Because the problem is, there's two angles that you could go at this with. If you went with the angle of like, there hasn't been a major for 2 years, and so this is all about re-establishing Counter-Strike. Like, we want some nostalgia. We want like, like maybe you ask like, Henry, do you want to come and do one? Or Sadikist's still around a little bit. Obviously, Anderson Semmer always hovering somewhere around the scene, You put some of those people on, you put some of the newer casters on, and then you figure it out at the event. Maybe you see like, if the old boomers basically aren't that good, then they just do the odd game. The priority's different. But my problem is this. I actually do think, even though I agree with what you said, Harry, like people haven't got the same LAN experience and all the rest of it, we don't yet know even that the event's going to be like that. We can't really know. Will it have the full crowd? Will it have that experience? We don't really know yet. So I personally do think that like you have to respect form, even in online play. Like it's the same with players. If someone's if like your Kindar tears it up all the time online, I can't like not have him in the team and then kick him and take walks if he did nothing during the online era. Like, there's got to be some sort of parity. Like, that's unfair in that scenario. It doesn't matter he was good 2 years ago. So I personally think there are certain people who are basically a must-hire. Like, I agree, the number one person, the first ballot is Maniac, because, like, of all the analysts, he's the most slick. He's done every fucking event. I don't know if he's ever made a mistake, ever. He's unbelievable. Even his shoulder contact, like I say, it's worth watching, even if it's sort of a bollocks premise, He's the must-hire, in my opinion. Then I think you've got to take Sponge and Machine. Listen, there's a world where they could just do the desk, obviously, but they want to be casters. I think they've done enough to establish themselves. They're pretty legit. After that, it's like preference. Like, I personally, in my world, I would hire Harry and Hugo, and I would hire Scrawny and Lawrence, because just look at the amount of work they did over this time period. Like, again, Anderson Semler did the odd event, and listen, I think they'd admit themselves. They're not the same people they were before. They're not in the same position. They're not even actually able to do every event like they were before, I'm sure they would gracefully admit, maybe you can hire us. Maybe it's not a must, though. It's not like the old days where, like, that would be outrageous if you didn't hire them. Like, they were, at minimum, the second best casters in the world, But then after that, I think you can go a lot of ways. Like, personally, if it was preference, aside from me, look, I don't give a fuck. I'm better than most of these guys. I would hire myself. The only other person on the desk I think sort of a must hire is probably Yanko. Like, I think he's done enough since he came back to, he's sort of reattached himself to his old status of being one of the best. After that, though, I have to say, you can go a million ways. Like, for example, I like working with him, but I know that Pimp's a preference for some people. Some people don't like him. I know one thing I've always thought, unfortunately, that I think he gets a bad rap for is when I'm not doing the desks, he tries to sometimes like step into being the villain like I do, right? And I've tried to encourage this, but the one thing I didn't realise was people don't really give him sort of the same leeway that they do. Like, even if they hate on me, they'll listen to the segment. People almost just like, they're just waiting to just say everything Pimp said is shit, or like that, he's just a fucking idiot or something, which I don't get it myself. Like, someone has to spice the desk up. Like, I've always said to Maniac, you're just lucky like people like me exist, mate. Otherwise, it's like if there was four of you, that'd get rough, mate. Everything can't be all right. You know, everyone can't be improving and, you know, give them a chance. And that's like, sometimes there has to be a guy like, fire this guy, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's like when like you're cooking something, you know, like you want like a variety of textures and flavors in there to make it good, to make it exciting, you know. And it's like I think Maniac is incredible in terms of the knowledge he has, and he's so poetic. That's what I love about him. I feel like he's flirting through the camera by like talking Counter-Strike to me in a very provocative way. Like I love the way that he talked, and he is so smart. Like I find it mind-blowing. I can't remember like how he told me how educated he was back in Russia, but it was like 4 years ago, and I was probably wasted at the time.
I believe he has like a degree, like 2 degrees in
psychology
like philosophy or some shit. Yeah, exactly.
I remember when we were in Russia, he was working on like some like dissertation for something, like just going on like casual, like it was nothing, while already having like 2 degrees under his belt, and he can speak like 7 languages. Like the guy is just crazy smart. So it's no wonder that he can talk so romantically about CS. But I do think then that's perfect to be contrasted by like one of these kind of, you know, like a Thorin or a Pimp, you know, like someone where they are like they have that ability to not be afraid to kind of get like rough with it, you know, like and say it how it is, or maybe like add a bit of like kind of comedic flair around it. You know, I think pairing Maniac with someone like that is great because it's almost like, you know, you get like the sweet and the salty, and that is like a brilliant that's like a brilliant combo.
I was gonna say, like, it adds more flavor to any broadcast, because even if someone makes a harsh point, then Maniac comes in and like counters that with his own his actual explanation behind it. So it actually explains way more behind the game to the casual viewer especially.
The other thing as well about the tiring thing, and we'll wrap this topic in a second and go to something else, but basically the other thing that is going to be rough in my opinion is just because it's been so long since the major, no one really knows when the next one is. Like in theory they're going to reschedule ESL Rio, but I'll just tell you right now, not really at the top of the priority list even for ESL probably right now. You know, I think they're just waiting that one out to see how that one plays out. So the problem is everyone who doesn't get hired, just because, like I said, there's so many names for this one that could be hired. Everyone's going to have the FOMO. Like, as you say, Harry, it doesn't... Here's the thing. If, like, for example, I mean, for obvious reasons, I genuinely don't give a fuck about ever working Katowice, even though I've actually been asked since the fact, believe it or not. You know, I have my own reasons where it's like, I'll just, in my mind, sort of be a hater and pretend it's not a big event. It is, of course. But here's the difference. If it's a major, everyone wishes they were there, mate. Everyone. Especially once the event's underway. Like, when there's some massive semi-final, you can play it cool all you like. Like, everyone's dying inside that they're not there, basically. Like, you have to be, because in that moment, like, there's nowhere you'd rather be in the whole world, is he? You want to, even if you weren't casting, you'd want to be in the crowd, wouldn't you? Like, watching the fucking match. So, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to basically be getting the rough end of the stick. Like, for example, even though I think, like you were saying, no, I think Mauisnake's got the chops absolutely be on a major. The problem is, he's done like one big event. He's just doing it right now. So if you know the way the industry works, it's hard for someone like that to get the jump up, especially because the other people can say, I was doing the last 2 years of stuff, wasn't I?
The thing with Maui, man, is that guy is definitely destined for greatness, man. Like, you can just tell, I don't know, whenever Maui comes to Europe, I always tell him this. I say, like, I can already feel Europe's gotten better now that you're here, because, like, he's just got such a good brain, and he really, like, when I say he does his homework, there's, like, a normal amount of homework that you can do going into an event, but Maui's, like, the guy who's, you know, like, in school, he's, like, already learnt the whole curriculum for the year. He's, like, moving on to some, like, next-level education stuff. Like, it's unreal. I remember when we showed up to do We Play Academy Season 1, right? And obviously, like, it's kind of hard to get too many data points for a lot of these teams. Like, they're very, very fresh. Some of them have been formed a matter of days before the event. I think Fnatic Rising came together on the day of the event. Yes. So, you know, like, there was not a lot of time. And yet Maui shows up having, like, not looked at the team, but he would go back, like, look at individuals and watch what they did in teams gone by and stuff like that, you know, like, and I don't even know where he's finding these resources, because, like, I'm going to HLTV and I'm like, mate, they don't even have a game listed. Like, I don't know how you have found stuff to watch for this guy. But, you know, like, he'll go out, he'll talk to the individuals, he'll try to, like, get this information also, he can add flavor, and it's unreal. It is a work ethic like I haven't seen on anyone else before, where he will be, like, crunching, you know, fucking 12, 14 hours of demos a day to feel like he's at this point where he's qualified to talk in depth about what these
I've got an anecdote for you, mate. A lot of people don't know this detail, because I don't flex it very often, just because it doesn't, I don't want it to sound like a shit way that it's not a great origin story. It's just for this particular story, it is. A lot of people don't know this. I know he like played at like the MDL level as like a semi-pro basically in NA, and I don't believe that. I don't think he'd ever actually casted. Maybe he'd done like an online game or something. Like maybe he'd done like that level, like an MDL or a cup or something. But he wasn't. He didn't have his foot in the casting door. And basically, the way I actually found out about him, aside from like I think I might have seen one YouTube video on Reddit or something, you know, like if you go to the new cube where every countdown votes everyone knew. Basically, that's not what the new cube's for, by the way, but that is what they do. So basically, what happened was I think it was in 2017, I actually got this sponsor and I thought, right, here's what I'll do with this sponsor. Why don't I actually get some people to help me with all the research? Like, as you're saying, like, mate, it's fucking time consuming doing 14 hours and then doing a video. It's like, this video doesn't really make sense for how much time I put into it. Like, the ad rev's not going to fucking pay for 14 hours. So what I did was I hired two people. I hired a guy from League of Legends and two people for CS, and Maui was one of them. And what I did is I just did an open thing. Anyone could apply via email, but I cleverly did two things. One, I made it so that I, like, only listed, like, very basic things as to what you should apply, because I wanted to see who's going to take initiative. And if in your email you just put like, I'm interested, please reply. Like, I obviously never fucking replied to that email. Like, you're an idiot, mate. Like, you don't even know you haven't thought it through. Like, no, as long as I got more than 5 emails, I ain't emailing you, am I? But he did a thing where he sent in a whole like explanation of what he'd do, what his background was. And then when I hired him, he was doing exactly that. Like, I would say, what I would do is I would basically be just like almost like a fucking professor trying to like set a task. I would just say, why is Edward struggling in Na'Vi? And then he would just send me like a week later, like a fucking write-up that was like, when they try to take map control on Inferno, Edwards is being used in an incorrect way. Like, fuck it, all right. Like, and here's the thing, you know, sometimes I disagreed with something I never used, but like, I could tell like this guy's fucking, he's going ham on this. He understands the premise of research basically. So when I got to do a gig, it was the Epicenter gig. Well, they had all this trouble getting talent because basically you had to get a visa and you had to get it like short term and you had to instantly fly to Russia like right before Christmas. So loads of people didn't want to do it. And so what people don't know is I was just hired as an analyst. Obviously, I was like the number one analyst. So what I did instead was I told them, because they couldn't get a host either. I said, how about this? I'll host the event, because like I've done a million talks. I can definitely host. I said, I'll host it. One conditional, you have to hire this guy. I know you don't know him, but just trust me. Hire this guy, bring him to the event, and mate, that's where it all just began. Because you saw that. Now here's the thing. I'm not saying that like I made him, because you have to understand, if he was shit, he would have died on his arse. I would have not hired him for Flashpoint, and that would have been the end. Like, but once he got, what I would say is I was just like the fucking accelerator pad in Mario Kart. I just sort of boosted him a little bit. And then once he got in though, this is what you see, like on Blast now, mate, you would have thought he'd done Blast in the past. He just fucking, he was rolling from the beginning, wasn't he? So no, I think that people don't realise, unfortunately, there's a premise here that, this is my final thought on this topic. The problem is this, right? Your reputation in esports lags a couple of years behind what you can actually do now. Because basically, it's not until you've done it, unfortunately, that anyone can ever really like believe in you, sort of. So even if you have potential and all that, like that doesn't get you hired in esports. Like what it does is you just have to do work. That's why, actually, to bring it back to the topic, even if you're doing shit events, here's the difference. If you can link to something in an email, like, well, I did this event, and they can click it and see you there, they could still envision you being on their B stream. And then once you're on their B stream, you know, it's like everything's one step closer, even though, as you said, it always does feel like you're still a million miles away. Like, you know, you're remote. The worst one ever of this, right? The worst is I've just speculated here, but I'm just going to guess. If you're on the B stream, but you're fucking remote and you're just doing it all, and then everyone else is like at the arena, all the vibes, and then afterwards, oh, let's go to the after party, and you're just like, well, I'll just go to sleep now in my bedroom.
Yeah. No, that is very much what it's like. Like it is, you know, and I know we don't want to just hang on this for forever.
No, that's all right.
But man, though, like it is the wildest thing. Like even, bro, like even this year, like we kind of had this like throwback to what it was like being on those B streams, because
of course,
for a lot of it, we got stuck in the UK for a little while, right? Like in the beginning of the year, and even for Cologne, this happened where like Chad and Alex go, and obviously it's just in a studio, it's not in an arena, but it still makes a difference in a way, right? Like you have like people around, you have like all the proper setup and whatnot, and everything sounds and looks brilliant. There's no issues, you don't have to worry about anything, and you have that ability, like when the event's over, you know, like you hang out, you get to see each other, and you know, like me and Hugo are just broadcasting all these shows out of his kitchen in like this tiny little flat, like, you know, it felt like being like back in like 2016 almost, where like you would just show up to some like tiny little room, and there's like a green screen behind you, and that's like the set that you get, you know. And then it's very like impersonal because it's all done remote. There's delays, there's little like production things that get in the way of your ability to do well, and then you don't get like that big payoff at the end of like all the social side of it, you know, like getting to see everyone, which is a big part of it. Like, I always used to neglect that for the longest time. I used to think like, oh well, like, you know, the event's over, I don't really want to go to an after party, I'm just going to go to bed. But it's like, I know I hit this point where I was like, actually no, man, like the people, and getting to hang out with them all and like getting to kind of, you know, like just discuss everything that we've done and like what's been happening, that is like a huge mental boost at the end of the event, you know. And you help, like, you know, obviously helps like networking and whatnot, but that's not ever what I'm really thinking about when I'm doing it. I don't know, man, like the social side of esports is a really beautiful thing, and I think that's one of the things that everyone's really missing, especially after this whole, you know, COVID era where there was no socializing like at all, you know, like you weren't hopping into the TeamSpeak of the guys you just played if you're a player, like, what's up boys, like, you know. But when you're at after parties and events, mate, like, you know, you'll have guys from you know, like maybe two.
Yeah, there we go. Actually, maybe we'll talk about complexity, because obviously they're in this weird scenario now where people have seen the report, and as far as I know, by the way, that is actually accurate. Like, basically, there's a decent chance you just don't see Config playing complexity again. Like, he's either in Astralis or another team, you know, whatever the scenario is, that might be the end. So this lineup you see now, I know people think it's like a stand-in lineup, and then it's like, well, what happened? Like, this might just be complexity. Like, this might actually be the lineup. And now, we'll say, it's pretty juicy. There's also rumours maybe some other big name players join complexity. So there's also, it's, you know, it's it at the end, basically, if you're a Call fan. But I have to say, my problem is, because I was watching this game of complexity, I have a problem with this team, and I want to get people's thoughts on it, which is like, when you construct a squad, in theory, the old days, you did just get the best players you could, and then you figure it out. Like, yeah, you play this spot, he plays this spot. Remember, in the early days, CS, it wasn't even necessarily fully set roles. Like, in the game, you just move around. If this guy's a beta, he's a beta. If this guy's aggressive, he's aggressive. And you hope it works out, right? In the modern day, where we sort of try and model it like sports, and we have roles, and we have like a concept of how the game works, I have one obvious problem in this team. It goes like this, right? BlameF is a lurking IGL. JKS is a lurking fucking Australian. I don't know where to go with that one. Cold Zyra is a fucking bait Zyra. Like, the problem with this is this. You got 3 fucking betas in this team. And that's before you got to the AWPer. The AWPer! Like, what's he going in first? Like, so I have to say, even though I actually thought what they did at Blast was amazing. Like, what a fucking sick run. It was really cool. They were like mixing it up with the best teams. I don't know about this lineup. It feels like you've got sort of too many of one type of player.
Yeah,
they even said it. BlameF even said it in his interview after one of their matches. He said the number of role clashes they have right now is actually really hard to work with.
Oh, fair play that you acknowledged it then,
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always get the impression that Blame is like a pretty honest dude like that. Okay. And I think, you know, if because, you know, like a lot of the folks who go to Reddit and start immediately typing out their thoughts, like oftentimes you are just wrong. Like a lot of the things that you read there are just horrible. But when even like, you know, the Reddit analysts are like getting in there and saying, mate, everyone on this team just doesn't go in. Like, you know, everyone's just kind of sat back doing nothing. It's like, you know, if they're noticing it, then maybe there actually is a problem. And I am inclined to agree with you. It was super weird because when we saw them just recently, and you know, they had NATO as a stand-in. Poison was actually taking over some of the like entrying duties. Yes. And weirdly enough, it actually made complexity look like pretty good in the sense, like, you know, bear in mind they're playing with a stand-in. They just had S-Tag join. They had like no time to practice. And you have Poison of all people on the roster being the guy to like run in first with an AK and like double entry A-site vertigo, which is just fucking mental, by the way, that he's even the one that like you'd look at. It was him and Blame doing a lot of the entry work, but it actually made them look pretty good, I thought. And like in a fashion that I don't think we're going to get to see with this roster in the iteration it is now. Like, you do have very, very similar players who are all about like working it low and slow and taking their time. And it's like, if you're all lurking, none of you are lurking, you know, like that's kind of the problem. I don't think so many of their rounds just fall apart and start to feel a bit directionless, which is a real problem when you've got someone who is as talented in terms of his leadership and like, you know, doing his research as BlameF. Like, this guy crunches so many, he's the fucking Mauisnake of players, mate. He's out there, you know, like doing all these doing all like these hardcore VOD reviews. He's like playing in ESCA refrag and whatnot, you know, like figuring out how to counter specific executes the teams run. And it ends up just feeling a little bit wasted because I feel like you never even see them in the positions to do the stuff they've prepared. You know, like, you don't have that guy to like kick the door in and start the round. And and that's like a real problem for me. Also, I just want to say, I think JKS has been kind of underwhelming since he joined this team.
Absolutely.
As sad as that is to say, like, I to join this team and go, fuck, man, look at how good this guy is. It's like everyone said, but mate, he's joined, and I don't know what it is, but like the amount of games I have where he just has like 4 kills by the end of it, and you're just kind of sat there going, oh baby, no, what happened? Like it's so uncomfortable, especially Vertigo, man. There's something about JKS on Vertigo. It's so hit and miss. His B-site anchoring, like, he always plays, you know, I call it Tetris, but I don't know what anyone else calls. You know that little like as you come up the ramp on the left on the B bomb site, there's like that fucking metal grating.
Right.
He always plays over there, and it's gotten to the point now where like teams have set nades when they play versus Complexity, just like triple nade him out of position, and then oh well, you're in B. And I don't know, man. Whenever I think of JKS, I remember this guy who was this unstoppable Aussie force of nature who could, if needed to, just haul, you know, Renegades, 100 Thieves, doesn't matter. He's got the Aussie boys on his back, and he's willing to do whatever. And we haven't ever really had that for Complexity so far, not consistently at least.
I don't even know if it's just JKS, because I've talked to a couple of other players and they said that Complexity aren't actually a very hard team to read, even despite all of the prep work that they do and all of the actual effort they put into their pregame. So to me, like, I think coldzera is a bigger addition to this team than just firepower and roles, because he's going to be he already secondary calls a lot. Even if you listen to some of their comms and their matches that they played over the Blast stream, he was already secondary calling or micromanaging some mini situations in mid rounds, and I think that adds a lot more value to this team than JKS as a player. And I think if BlameF transitions to more of an entry role, like he did for Blast and did for ESL Pro League when NATO was in there, then the team could possibly work, but just not with JKS. I think they would have to have Cold take over that sort of role and probably bring in another player if they actually want to make moves to go into like a top 5 role.
This is also, though, where, like, when you're from the outside, like we are, we're not in 100 Thieves, and we don't necessarily know, like, all the dynamics of how it works. One of the problems I feel like is if you know that team, they were actually how they were marketed. They were just, like, the most laid-back team of all time. Like, people like Azu and JKS are just mad chill. Like, there's a reason why they just played together forever, basically. But the problem is, I think, personally, is when you're JKS in that team, everyone knows which way their bread is buttered. Like, they all know you're the star player, and basically the first thing they do is give you all your spots, all the resources, and because you usually outperform the others, you never get any of the blame and any of the criticism. In fact, they can lose the game and people go, JKS is really good, though in fact he should be in a better team. Now, if you go and you get the bump up to join a team like Complexity and people know you're on like a massive contract, it's like, this is like supposed to be a power move, remember? That was supposed to take them to the top. That was what was going to put them over the top and make them like elite team or something. Well, when they do that, first of all, the expectations are enormous. And then secondly, it's very different. Everyone going, listen, take whatever you want. Or you having to go and fight for what you want. Like, maybe you want a role or a spot, or you want more resources, but you have to speak up. Like, if you don't, someone like Config's not going to wait while you do that. He's just going to say, I'll take that. Or someone, as you say, like BlameF, if it's his team, he's going to say, well, I want to play this spot, because obviously he's quite unique as an IGL in that sense, putting himself in a winning position sometimes. And I'll just briefly say, I do have a bit of an issue on the BlameF one, because the problem is, no one ever actually says, I notice, he's like an amazing IGL. Like, no one says, like, oh, Strats at God tier, or look at the way he read this game. What they say is what Harry said. They go, but he spends so many hours in demos. It's like, yeah, my problem with that is, like, fragging-wise, he's killing it. Obviously, he's one of the best IGLs we've ever had for fragging. But when he plays, it does give me trigger, like, PTSD for when Happy used to play in Envious. Because here's what people don't get. There's an analogy, and it's harsh as fuck, but it's just true if you think about it. Happy, right, once, because you have to understand what was funny was, even though me and him just totally disagreed about the game, we would just like argue about it at after parties over drinks, and just like for 3 hours every time we met. And like, it was just like it was like a chess match we were playing by post. We'd just meet and then resume the chat. Like, well, actually, Existence was doing this better than you. No, he wasn't. You do not know what the meta was, but and we were just arguing the whole time, right? But one time, right, I was telling him, here's the thing, right? And someone made an analogy I brought to him because it just stuck with me. It's so perfect. Because I used to say to him, I'll tell you one thing, Happy, even though I disagree with how you play, if you win, I won't criticise it, because if you win, you must have had some read that made sense. Something that you did in the game worked. It was on some level efficient, no matter how much it looked like you were baiting. Maybe baiting works if you do that. Maybe I said, but if you ever stop winning, mate, I said, I'll be right up your ass. Because I'm going to come with the truth. And the problem was this, right? He tried to explain to me that when he did a lurk, because here's the problem. Lurking doesn't really mean you're last in line. Lurking means that you're on a different part of the map. And sometimes lurking should be the guy who, by the way, sometimes transforms into the entry if you're doing a quick rotation. Yeah. Or, he comes behind the backstabs. And he means that, if you're all going to wrap on A on Dust 2, he comes through the double doors and shoots someone in the back. He doesn't wait for them to cross all the way over and then come and just win the clutch. So Happy did used to sort of just wait basically the whole time, and then if he killed people, it's because they were just walking past him for free, or he just came and won when two people were dead in the site. And someone once explained it to me, and I repeated it, and he had no answer for this at all. This is the checkmate move. I said to him, right, if you're basically off on the side of the map and 4 people on your team go into the bomb site, they take the bomb site, and then you're killing rotations, you're hiding somewhere so they have to deal with you. I said, listen, that might sound like you did something, but logically, if the 4 people took the site, if you'd have been there with them, wouldn't it just be more guaranteed they'd take the site? And then you'd also have 5 people on the bomb site with and then he was just basically he'd never thought this thought through. He never thought it to that extension, right? And he just had nothing. It was checkmate. I was like, there you go. Peace. I'm out, motherfucker. Now give me a cider. I just rizzle-dizzled out there. I actually had got him. I was inside his head. I was like the Matrix, It was like when Morpheus, they're telling him, he's like, the human race is a virus. It's fucking disgusting. You look at you, fucking make me sick. It was like that. I was just broke his mind completely. I was in his fucking mind palace. It was unreal. So basically, that's my problem with BlameF. Is I think his actual skills are mega, but I think sometimes, I'll agree, he did look like he played differently at Blast, but sometimes it's I think it's too passive, because as you're saying, if people are saying they're easy to read, that means they also know where you are, dude, and they're just going to avoid you or whatever,
I mean, to add to that, he's also, like you said, his skill individually is actually exceptional. He plays a lot, he DMs a lot. I don't understand why his role is to shoot people in the back. It makes little sense especially when you have players like JKS, Cold, who can fill that role already. It doesn't really make sense to not be part of the 3 entry pack for me, for someone like BlameF, especially if he has a read for where they're going.
Yes.
So one of the things I've always thought about with Cole, especially in the last year and a bit, and this is maybe leaning deep into my armchair psychologist, position, but it is just that with how many hardships and setbacks that this team has faced, I can't imagine that for the incumbent players who have been there for a while, that you're especially looking at someone like JKS, who bear in mind is obviously away from home, stuck out here, has been
very terrible circumstances
years now, right? And it's on top of that, well, look at what this team went through. Poison was out for fucking ages with his injury, so they were just fielding standing after standing after standing. Then it's then they had the whole Oboe situation as well, where he left because he couldn't deal with the pressures of being away from home, and it just feels. And then obviously Config sustained his injury, and it's just what the fuck is happening to this team? Who have they pissed off upstairs to invoke this almost godlike hatred of the team that finally when they get everyone together and they're going, all right boys, this is it, this is our event, this is what we've been waiting for, Poison's back in, JKS is smiling, nothing can go wrong, then they get the call from Config in A&E boys, I've broken my wrist, and it's fucking great, man. And I think for some of these guys that really must start to hurt the morale, right? Especially with what we say about BlameF, where he does put all this work in. It's imagine you're doing all that, you're coming up with specific stuff and responses for every individual, and then next event, well, they're out actually, and we have to play with the standing, and we have 2 days to get NATO Sapphics ready and in the server. I don't know, man. A part of me starts to wonder, for people like JKS, are they just a bit out of it, in the sense that your mind just isn't in the right place because you've always had these horrible caveats with every event that you've tried to attend as the team.
One thing as well. Go on.
I was just going to say, same interview, BlameF said that he's had to have, I think, 5 or 6 3-hour-long conversations each time they add a new player and have to swap out. Peacemaker, NATO Sapphics, Cold Zera, JKS. Every single time one of these players was added, he had to sit there in a private server for 3+ hours each day just teaching these players their own system, whatever they're running, etc. So I don't know. I feel like that's almost an excuse on JKS's part if that's the case, because I think if everybody else on the team is putting in that effort to try and catch everybody up on it, then you sort of have to work with what you have, right? In that scenario, you're going to have to deal with those issues up until they resolve. So saying that it's sort of being complicit and complacent in it isn't really a fair enough excuse for what these players are getting paid.
100%, but I don't know. I just maybe this is because I'm someone who's very prone to having lapses in mental health, shall we say? Like I just look at it from the perspective of like maybe you're prepared to deal with like the first few setbacks and like the first few knocks, and every single time like you're trying to dust yourself off and then make it happen. But then it is just it just feels like you've done that so many times, and also you're doing all of this while you haven't seen your own family for like years, and like all this is happening, and like online everyone's going, oh fucking JKS should just die. It's like, great, okay, like that's what you get to see when you go online. I do kind of feel for them, because like, do you remember when this team was like first formed, back when you had like Rush and Oboe back in it, and they show up to Blast in London, and they look like shit hot. They went on like this run of like everyone was going, oh my god, like this complexity squad looks legit. And if you remember, like BlameF had come in and had like this super high salary as well, which considering his experience at the time, it was like, fuck, that's a big move to have gone for that. And it looked like this team was going to be so exciting, and then it just it just kind of crumbled. Like it all started with the poison injury into the Oboe dropping out. It feels like that really hurt the team, because that kind of came out of left field. It felt like like he just left just before playoffs, I'm pretty sure, right? So it was like it was a whole thing where I do genuinely wonder if like this team do need like the reset of like what they've done now, where they've brought in a bunch of new faces to try and like build a brand new roster. But even losing someone like Config, like how the fuck do you replace a Config? Like that's not a player you can just go, oh yeah, there's loads of guys just like him. It's like, no, he's part of a very select breed of people.
The worst thing is as well, the other name they brought in, ErikHillestad, because everyone just only cares about coldzera joining the team. It's like this guy gets no hype at all. I think he's actually been playing arguably the best relative to his role in the team. Like he looked like he instantly slot in and just immediately was like doing a good job. Because everyone obviously was still crying about Rush leaving, right? Because it was like nostalgia, and also he's a great guy, and he puts in the hours. The problem with this is these are all secondary and third reason. It's the first thing he didn't say is he's fucking sick of the game. You start with that if they're really good. It's like going, oh, look, she's got a really nice personality, she can cook, and that motherfucker, you'd have said something like, come on, why would that be the first thing you'd tell me? I don't know about this blind date, mate. I don't know about this. So all I'm saying is this, right? ErikHillestad, I feel like is still unfortunately feeling the effect of being in Cloud9. But I always said, if anything, he was one of the people who did his fucking job in Cloud9. The one problem I had with ErikHillestad at Cloud9 was this. Obviously, you can't pay him like $40,000 a fucking month, can you? Like, if I know that information, I can't delete that from my brain. So then when I see him just play as like a support player or whatever, I'm just thinking the whole time in my brain, so basically that should be like Nico device called it. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I think, unfortunately, that made people, because that was the angle to laugh at ErikHillestad. He never played bad in Cloud. You just laughed at that angle of like, wow, you wasted all this money on this guy. So I feel like coming into complexity, people are forgetting he's playing like, he's like a fucking, an entry in a support, basically, depending on what the map is. Like, definitely with those players we described before who take all the space, he's basically there to fill in the gaps. And I actually think he's the thing, he is like a journeyman. He's never going to be a star player, but you look at his career, he's just a very solid player. Just a really solid player, isn't he?
I look at ErikHillestad, man, as like a glue almost. Like even looking back to like his really early heroic days, like he was in and out of that team a fair bit, and it was always like he would come back in and it would be like, oh well, we don't really have like an AWPer right now, so you're gonna AWP, and he would just adapt, he would just do it, and he would do it well, like, and that's kind of like a rare quality, I think, because a lot of players have like their defined idea as to how they want to play the game. Even looking back to, and obviously IGLs maybe have like more opinions here, but like even looking back to what you were saying with Happy, when like you and him would argue about like how you guys viewed the game. I think a lot of players have their view on what they want to do, and like a team will work well if a bunch of guys who have similar visions come together and make something. But the thing that's great about ErikHillestad is it feels like he can play any style of CS, and he's just a very pliable player, where it's like if you need someone who can do this, even if he can't do it right away, like he will put the time in to get just as good as the next guy in something that maybe he isn't comfortable in. Like we've seen this guy AWP, we've seen him secondary AWP, like it's kind of, and then like he was a support player as well. Like, he's kind of done it all, and I have monumental support for ErikHillestad. I really loved him even when he was like in and out of heroic, because it just felt like he never really got to do what he wanted to do in that team, right? Like he was just kind of treated as like and I mean like early heroic here, like he was almost like kind of the spare part of the team, like how like Nohte gets called up as a sub and they just plug and play him however they want. That's kind of almost what it felt like S-Tag was with like his exit coming back in. But that's why I was hoping that when he went to Cloud9, especially after showing off in like the Astralis team when he joined, that was going to be like, the chance for S-Tag to be like this brand player. But obviously then Cloud9 fell apart. And like you say, when you know how much he's earning, when you know how much they paid for him, suddenly you're judged through like this incredibly harsh lens, which, being real, like if this was like, if you didn't know his salary and if you didn't know, if it was on a lesser team, he wouldn't have faced the same scrutiny at all, really. Yeah. Like...
Right, because what I thought was this, right? There's an interesting detail people aren't going to realise about the RMRs, which is they keep forgetting the RMR only works off the points of the RMRs. It doesn't matter what you do. In theory, you could have won like IEM Cologne, but if you did shit in the RMRs, you're in trouble. So the problem is, ever since we came online and it got to the end of last year, because I remember at Flashpoint 2 and just before, it was actually the qualifiers for Flashpoint where Virtus.pro first started becoming good again. They'd all those months where they played not at all, basically, and they'd been semi-shit, but they got Kinder into the lineup, and they were banging. Like, obviously, they won Flashpoint 2 even. And then after that, Kovacevicd, they're still legitimate, like they're in the final. If you remember, that was when the people were thinking like, holy fuck, this is like the CIS era, because you've obviously got Na'Vi always. Then Gambit came along, then you had this team, and then on the outskirts, just as a dark horse, you had Spirit as well, and it was like, what the fuck is this? Like, in theory, they could have 4 teams in the top 4. They could literally, but this is what's tragic. I don't think people have been keeping track of this. Basically, even though Virtus.pro in other tournaments is still money, even when they're in the LAN at Cologne, they were actually still a pretty good team. They were dangerous. Like they could beat people. Even though in theory they probably are a LAN team. In the RMRs, they are in a fucking bad spot because at the moment they're in the spot that doesn't qualify. And the problem is the gap between them and forZe and K23 is like 800 or 900 points. And basically, since you get so many points even for 5th, they almost have to just go fucking ham at this one RMR, otherwise they just won't be at the major. And someone like K23, like, a bunch of Kazakhstani players, you don't necessarily know that well, they might be at the major instead. And so I feel like this might be a tragedy because this team is clearly good and they've got their own super defined style. They've got star players, they've got Kinder and Jame, and they've got, like, basically, I just want to see the really good teams at the major. And I feel as though there's a world where there's a very real world where this team doesn't go to the major, no matter what the rest of the circuit. So, no, what do you think about this? What do you think about Virtus.pro?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to them in the last couple of months because they did just go on a straight downturn. I don't know, like I think there was reports where they're considering a roster move already as well, which is just a shit way to go into.
It was implied they were going to cut Sanji, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's just to have that in the back of your heads going into the last couple of big events of the year is already going to make you perform worse. Like it's going to put more pressure on you, depending on the player, obviously. But I think going into the RMR where basically your spot on the team is on the line, that can't really help the player who's spending his entire time on the server dropping guns for Jame and playing with an MP9 or a Deagle half the time. Like Sanji is not a bad player if you actually watch him play. It's just the fact that a lot of what he does on the team isn't going to get supported. So I don't know. I think they probably are still in with a decent shot to make the major. I think because Na'Vi and Spirit are in one group, and I think Gambit and in their group, the only team that I can see outside of Gambit offering them trouble would be probably forZe and K23, if that. Yes. So I think they're still in for a chance of getting a top 5 spot, and I don't really think they can get pushed out. But if they don't make this, then they I feel like they have to make a roster change at that point. There's not much that's going to redeem them in the current spiral they're going on.
See, the thing that is scary though, right, is you're kind of hinging on like Duncan said, because the gap is so big, right, that like even if you fall short, you're just done like immediately. Yes. But like even if you manage to excel, you're still kind of hinging on like these other teams. Like
they need to fuck up really
to fuck up in some way, or else it still might not be enough. So it's always awkward when like the fate's out of your hand. One thing I will say is like what you said as well, Nohte, is that they have fallen off a bit of a cliff as of late, right? And Dastan, the coach, did say they were going to make changes. That's also a statement he made heading into the first RMR, all the way back at the road to Rio. I think that was last year. He said the exact same thing when they were going into that. That was when they were still playing with Adren in the squad, and then it was actually the lackluster results there that led to Adren, leaving that team, and then they bought in Yekindar. So you look at like what that did, and maybe at the time it's like, oh, that's not a great thing to say, but hell, man, maybe this team does need to change, because like. Yeah. I don't know what it is about VP. Like their style was kind of cool when it was working, because it looked so big brain and it was like very unique. Right, they could just win around in the final like 15 seconds after just holding map control for the entire round, and then it's just, oh, you've lost. And in a way, like there's a very ugly beauty to that. Like there's a lot going on to hit those timings right, and there's a lot of teams that fuck up those timings. Na'Vi are a great example, by the way. Like the amount of times I've seen Na'Vi, especially on maps like Overpass, just lose the time. And it's like, what the fuck? Yes. Like you're trying to like relive this golden era of Na'Vi, like pushing in 10 seconds, but it just doesn't work. And that's why it is beautiful that VP were able to get away with it for so long. But I think when that is the style you're doing, and this is something that a lot of these slow-paced teams have learned, like in times gone by, even thinking back to, like a Pronax's Fnatic back in the day, like it was... It's like everyone needs to be on the same page, and you all need to have full faith in each other if that's the style you're going to play. And it does get me worried with like, Sanji being outlined as this guy who could get dropped, because if you don't have that same faith, and if you don't have Sanji as this incredible support player we know him as, then are you going to be able to make that slow, very, very, reliant on your teammate style work when you're constantly worried that, oh, I'm getting dropped after this, so what does it matter anyway? Like, I don't know. And honestly, I think VP maybe could even do with a change, because it does feel like Yekindar's too much of a linchpin at the moment. And like, his consistency isn't there yet. Like whenever we've seen him at the heights, man, this team looks unbeatable, because he's like the one guy who doesn't subscribe to that mantra of I'm going to take it real low and slow. Like he'll just run around the map like a wild animal, man, and fuck people up. And that's like the little X factor that they have to try and open up rounds, and then let Jane craft this fucking 4D chess maneuver to make it all happen. But I do. A part of me does feel like maybe you could get another Yekindar type where there's someone who is a bit more free flowing, and look to pad it out there, because Yekindar's consistency isn't really there, and in games where he goes quiet, VP just kind of become non-existent, and I think that's been a bit of a problem for them recently, right? He hasn't been having these incredible games, and that shows in the results, because they've been bombing out of tournaments ever since that's happened, and now they're talking about restructuring the team, so clearly something's off. Because man, like there was that point in time where it just felt like, VP are playing, they're probably going to make semi-finals at least, and that was like a safe bet. Like, and it wasn't even that exciting to watch them do it. They managed to get to like the Astralis level of fuck me, not these guys again, like so damn quickly, because the style they play is just this slow style where you win it through attrition. Essentially, it's like, look, if you can't play 100% for 60 rounds of Counter-Strike, you're fucked. and that was what it was like playing up against them. But it feels like teams have started to figure that out, started to get a bit better at dealing with it, and and you don't have your same pop-off player anymore. So I don't know, VP are in a very rough spot right now, especially with the RMR points being the way they are.
For me, it's what you said at the end there is the key. If people can go check the record, even when they were at their peak, I did tell people this. One of the reasons I used to pick against VP all the time, like Flashpoint, I picked against them almost every single time, even though they obviously went on to win the tournament, is because I actually said the curse of being an analyst is when I watch the demo, I don't have any of the thoughts of like, but I like to do this against it. Like, I can just watch the demo as a totally objective observer. And when I would watch them, I was like, dude, some of this shit's just gimmick shit. Like, in theory, if people actually don't just think they're a worse team than us, if they just watch the demo like I do, and they take all their preconceptions out, and they just look at what Jame and Yekinda are doing on the most opposite ends of the spectrum, it's like both of them can be figured out. Like in Yekinda's case, the whole reason he actually sort of like blew people away is because sometimes he would take like the most crazy obvious peak, but with like no utility. And the fact and the whole premise is in your brain, you're like, well, no one's just going to peak that again. And he would just shoot someone in the head with an AK instantly, and suddenly it's like a 5v4. And then at that point in time, by the way, if James baiting and lurking, then that works when you've got numbers advantage. Like that's not even the downside. And then he comes in and wins around at the end. And I even used to think this is insane because both of these guys, the second one of them falls off, the other one's in trouble. Because the other thing that made them crazy was they were just a beta team when it was Jame before, and they would win like weird games. Yekinda obviously like broke the game open and made them amazing. But I always said, And even though I know he himself didn't believe it because he was putting in all those hours, it's like, you can admit, this is going to be the most, like, one day it will unfortunately be the most readable style. Because you sort of always go for the aggro push and you just do it, like, on your own. And basically, the second people punish you doing that, there's not going to be a refrag. Like, you're just going to be dead. And now it is 5v4.
Exactly,
whereas before, you were making it 5v4. You were making it OP as fuck. And on the James side, I actually will admit, it's very different to watch a player like that than to play against them. But the problem I think James had was this. When they were underdog status, if you're the top 10 teams, you don't play them often enough. So what happens is every other team in the world teaches you how not to play against James because he does that insane, like, super passive off-angle style with the AWP. He never will peek into you. So every other AWPer's teaching you, like, well, he has to peek eventually, and they never does he? And as a result, he gets away. But when you play against the guy 10 times in fucking 4-month span, eventually you're going to figure out, like, these guys aren't morons. Like, Carrigan, fucking Glaive, and all these IGLs aren't morons. They're going to figure you out. Like, they're going to go, right, like you were saying about JKS, they're going to have, like, utility for you, mate. Like, they're just going to smoke you out of a sight, and they go, well, Jim never pushes through. So, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to figure out your angles, and when they figure out those two players, that is VP, unfortunately. The others just sort of do a bit of everything. So I agree, mate. The problem is, even though when it was working, it was a very cool, unique style. No one had this style in the world. And that's why I think they excited so many people. The problem is, I do feel like they're one player away. Like, they got to change a player. Like, that, like, you know, they were trying to make it kind of like when Boomich was in Na'Vi early on. Like, oh, he's sort of a meme and he does crazy shit with, like, SMGs. It's like, is that a real thing? Is that a role? like, there's no such thing as a mask in the game, bro. Like, what are we doing here? Like, you know, like, I noticed in Astralis they don't have a meme. Like, what are we doing? So I always felt like, unfortunately, one day those players have to be surplus to required. Now, listen, Boomich has sort of turned it around in Na'Vi. He's kind of found, like, a way to make it work. I will add the caveat. When I say make it work, it's like he can die and then just give info, and then Simple's like, right, I'll kill both of them. You know, like, that doesn't really add up on a chalkboard, Boomich, if you don't have Simple there. But the problem is, I do agree on the Sanji one. First of all, they did just treat him like a fucking pack mule. Like, they just like, here's all the shit. And by the way, give me a gun every round. And then people are like, well, look at his stats. And it's like, mate, how could his stats be good? He's never a gun. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm thinking about it because, like, now that you can drop nades, Sanji is actually.
Oh my god!
Like, this guy's gonna have nothing.
I know. He's just stood behind chucking nades at people.
I've seen Sanji have 4950, drop Jame and op with no armor, and Jame drops him nothing. Like, not even a
No, right? Jim probably just buys himself a sidearm. Yeah, exactly. Like, I need a deagle actually as well, mate. So, nothing for you. Absolutely nothing. No, it's mental. So the problem is, he's the obvious person to replace. It just feels. And as well, I'm not being harsh, he is just he's not connected to the others. He's not from Kazakhstan. He doesn't have the history, you know. So I feel like they will just replace him. I will say, though, they're in trouble because if you remember, as Na'Vi and the other teams found out, the way transfers work in the CIS region is like, it's almost like, I'll make a joke here, obviously. It's almost like they're back in the Soviet Union with like a central planning commission, and you're like, I'd like to apply to have this good player. And then they're like, no, he goes to a different region. And you're like, oh, well, thanks. I'll apply again in 6 months. Like, dude, people in the West are like, just buy the player. You're like, it doesn't work that way there, bro. Like, no one, by the way, no one really knows how it works. And even more disturbing, they never say anything in interviews. And then they did that thing, Nohte, you'll remember this, where there was just that really weird piece of news where it's like, Na'Vi and other teams are having a conference to decide how players will be transferred. What the fuck are you talking about? What is going on? No, sadly, because it's CIS region, no one was in that room. No one knows what the fuck was said at that meeting, you know. Like, dude, that's why I say, like, it feels like another world. Like, I try not to even speculate on who they can sign, because I don't know. I really don't know who you can sign.
So that was the thing. When we were talking about it earlier, I actually went and looked at the VP Prodigy page, because that's the only team I can possibly see them just getting a player from, just because of that exact scenario. And I just don't know any of these player names. Like, they didn't perform very well in WePlay, as far as I know. Like, Na'Vi has 2 rosters that have farm players for them.
Yes.
So where are VP going to get the good players from? Because Na'Vi have a junior and a youth team where half the good like
I love that one, by the way.
Sitting on.
That VP Prodigy squad in WePlay, they were pretty ugly for the most part. It was hard to find much to be excited about there. Like, you know, there was some fun parts, like Rufire, right? He's like the older guy on the team, because they are all very, very young, but obviously he's 26, right? So he like bumps the team average up a lot. And so he's like the experienced dude, but like the only thing I really remember about VP Prodigy was Rufire and the fact that he started playing like shotguns on Ancient in Cave, and like that's like the only takeaway I have from VP Prodigy was that like Rufire made the Mag 7 look viable on one map. And it's like when that's like your takeaway, and you know, it's not like he's like a mad fragger either. He's like a very middle of the pack player. When that's the guy that you're paying attention to, it is a bit, you know. And the only other maybe promising guy I would have said there was Lomic. But he's an AWPer, right? So you don't want to bring him into this main VP squad where you've already got James, the fucking, you know, king savior of all AWP players. So yeah, I don't think you could bring anyone up from that team that would actually be an upgrade. So you would be left looking, you know, into the CIS transfer list, I guess you'd call it, but. Man, I don't know. It's so bonkers. Like some of the buyout numbers I've heard for CIS players that like, haven't even accomplished much.
It's
like, oh, you want 10 million for fucking Zerison from VP Prodigy. Oh, sound, you know. And by the way, it's not a real number. I did just make that up. I have no insider info there. But yeah, it is fucked. And I don't know who they're gonna get. But there's just so much talent in the CIS region, right? It feels like it should be an easy task if it wasn't for all this, you know, red tape in the way. Yeah, no, man, I don't know about VP. It's very, very weird. Like, the other thing as well, like, I always look at them as like having so you remember like Get Right in an IP with everyone knows like he's lurking on you, he's stabbing you in the back. Sure. But it kind of got to this point where it was like you killed Get Right on A, and so now you're kind of going, well, they'll probably B if he's over here, right? And it's like they have the reverse issue of that on VP where like you're just on the lookout for the one mad guy doing stuff in your Kindle. And like once you found him, you just go, well, the rest of the guys, they're probably going to come at us very slowly and with very little, you know, like, so it's super weird how this team operates. And I think it's kind of a miracle that it lasted as long as it did almost. I think a lot of these teams in CIS as well, forZe are another one that I'll say do this. And this is something you were saying earlier, Thorin. When they're the underdogs, they look incredible, but it's like the moment they start to get up there, that's where it drops off. And dude, forZe are just like that. Like I'm a big fan of Jerry, the IGL of forZe. So I really like this team. But man, like with a lot of these Jerry-led squads, because forZe before used to have Face Crack and how have I forgotten his name, dude? Hang on a moment. I'm refreshing. I need to.
It's the guy who just left the team. Yeah, Exapower.
That's the one. Z-Power. Yes. How could I forget Z-Power, man? Yeah, so they used to have these two, and like Jerry wanted to keep that 5-man roster for the longest time. Like they just played together as that 5. And Z-Power was fucking great, if you remember. And then like finally they make this swap happen because the results were just waning. If you remember in 2019, there was actually a time where like forZe were kind of the second name in CIS next to Na'Vi. It was really cool. And then, you know, then the roster started to slip off as people started to learn their tendencies more, and like some of the little things that they like to do didn't work. And now they're on this rise again with the new players of Zorti and Kenzie, and it's looking like a good project again. But a part of me does feel like they are just destined to go the way of like this VP squad or forZe of old, where they're like a flash in the pan of some brilliance. And then once, you know, you start to figure it out a bit, there's not that like ability to stay on top and like keep it up, because it is hard, right? That's why it's so impressive that like Astralis had an era that spanned as long as it did, because you know, you like to think, oh, you can just figure it out, like you said, like all these other IGLs aren't idiots, but it's all about like trying to innovate. And it just feels like with some of the CIS teams, they get stuck in like that one identity that they have, and like their one mantra,
right? And when we had him on, I tried sort of asking in a semi-polite way, like basically, how come like someone like you or the other players, how come they never really do leave forZe and go to a Na'Vi or go to these big? Why does it not really? I tried to sort of like poke a little bit and see what I could get. And if you go back, if someone's really interested, go back and watch the episode, because it's really disturbing the way he answers. He sort of answers as if he sort of starts by going, yeah, you know, sometimes I have thought like, you know, what if I did join? And then it's almost like something in the back of his mind like kicks in, like a switch just flips, like a little implant, and he goes, but then I realized, like, this is wrong. I have not asked permission of my... I am under contract. Like, basically, he almost makes it sound like he's, like, owned by forZe. Like, not just even playing for them. Like, they just own his soul. And it's sort of like he's, like, you know, betraying his fucking tribe by leaving or something. And I just wanted to be like, well, I can't really relate to any of that. I'm horrified. I don't know what to ask, because obviously you couldn't do the event, so I don't want to make this awkward. So... Just gonna let that go. Yeah, we're all just gonna pretend like that's totally fine what you've just said, and you are the property of whoever the fuck runs forZe. That guy was fucking implied he was gonna beat me up if people don't know. It's basically a guy, no joke. Because me and Richard pointed out, because if you don't know, forZe was another team that were doing some fuckery. It wasn't actually the coach view.
It was the demo thing, right?
Yeah, basically they were doing a thing, Harry, where if you joined their practice server, there would just be sort of a sixth man, Billy Bob 777 or whatever. But really, that was just recording the demo of the whole thing. Yeah. And then when it was outed, they tried to do this thing where it's just deny reality and just no, we didn't do that though. And then even Yanko,
it wasn't even a 6-man. It was a server setting that allowed the.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. Okay.
So you were getting their POV as well.
Yes, exactly. You could just watch them. Basically, you could just watch their whole strats. And then the mad thing, obviously, fucking Valence was off going. Yeah, everyone should have that. If you remember that, that's just banter. If you remember the thing, he probably told them about it. No, but anyway, and then when they tried to deny it, Yanko, because he doesn't give a fuck because he's from Serbia, mate, he just rolled up you used to do that to us all the time as well. And then they were like. And then because they were sort of caught, right, me and Richard were just going in, and then the CEO's one of those guys who I just don't think follows the game and seen super close. So he was coming out with mad angles, who the fuck is it? Think he's a journalist? You can't say that to Richard Lewis, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean? That beggars. But listen, at least when Fastro was doing it to Nohte here, some people might have been yeah, who the fuck is Nohte? Fucking Richard Lewis. I think everyone knows him, not least because half of you think you're blocked by him, don't you? So anyway, when this guy came at us in that angle, well, you know what, Harry? Believe it or not, sometimes me and Richard Lewis we can be a bit sort of prickly when people come at us and sort of directly diss us or whatever. So I was just straight saying this guy's a cunt or whatever, on Twitter. And this guy just put some mad comment that was just sort of it was almost, I can't remember what he said, but basically I actually asked someone who knew Russian culture, and he essentially said the equivalent of if in England someone just said maybe I'll meet you in real life and we'll have a talk about it. He just said the equivalent to that. And it was all oh, cool.
Reasonable.
Just to see you're basically threatening to beat that ass if I ever go to Russia or whatever, By the way, don't worry, mate. I won't be going to Russia. I won't be happy.
You're just accruing the death threats nowadays.
I know.
Your blacklist of countries is growing. No, dude, and it is weird because Jerry has been in that team for 4 years.
Ages.
I have no idea what's happened there, but maybe he has just signed a lifetime deal with forZe. He's going to be like a 50-year-old
dude. This is mad. But I think it was in 2017. Do you remember when Hellraisers had those good players? They had Walksake and they had a bunch of fucking players like that. They had Angel as their IGL, right? Because the whole thing is Hellraisers, right? Their whole theme's the devil. This is mental. When one of them re-signed, they had it all the graphic was it was the devil having him sign in blood his contract, like a cartoon devil. And listen, my problem is I'm just thinking back to that now, and that's too on the nose. That'd be hilarious. If an NA team did that, it'd just be banter. That's too on the nose, mate. The devil. By the way, there's a weird thing. If anyone's out there, genuine question to people from CIS region, why is everything about the devil in Russia? When you go there, Harry, there's all energy drinks hell drink. It gives you hell. And you're what are you talking about? This is madness. There's about 4 drinks, I'm sure, that are called some shit like that, fucking devil juice. Get the devil inside you. You know what I mean? What is this? Listen, that's not even a fun theme. I guess Monster's a little bit like that, but fuck it, it's just weird. It's just weird. Why is everything about the devil?
There's only one clip of you, Duncan, I remember to do with Monsters.
I know.
Energy drinks.
By the way, you do know, Nohte. Some people, this is the problem I didn't think of with that. Obviously, you can't necessarily see what it says on that can you? You think it's just Monster. So people don't know. I didn't improv that. In Russia, because it's a different culture, the monster that's the original one literally is called Black Monster.
Yeah.
It says Black Monster on it. And listen, think about the size of a can of Monster. It's motherfucker, this is way too on the nose. And obviously the shape, remember that famous thing they say in American culture, girth like a Coke can. I was just is this real life? Listen, mate, obviously my whole style, I'm this is a gift from the gods, isn't it? So then I knew when Stunner put that thing right to his lips, I was the taste of that Black Monster. Listen, you have to understand, that was one of those moments where Stunner's brain was just that numbers gif where it's calculating all the shit. What can I actually say that won't get fired right now? It's just calculating 700 things. It was a classic moment. If people don't know, by the way, this is a really weird thing. That moment got put in PewDiePie's next sort of react video where he just collects weird TikTok type stuff. Yeah. So there's just a clip and he doesn't even react. He just goes lol. And then just goes to the next one, which is that's a bit surreal. Yeah, that's up there. Also, by the way, is that how I've got a quick anecdote, very quick one. One thing in League of Legends that tilts Monte Cristo is he had a really famous moment like that early on where he blew this train whistle at the Season 3 Worlds, but that was in like 2013. And the joke is, all the casual fans only remember him. It's like, oh, you're the man with the whistle. It's like, I actually did just work for like 7 years after that. It's like, one of the most respected analysts. I feel the same way. It's like, wait a minute. So I've been doing all this amazing banter, jokes, and my only time I get a little breakthrough, aside from just calling Shaq fat, which, listen, that was pretty cool, I can't lie, is just making a joke about the can being a massive dick going in your mouth. All my work was for nothing. All the historical work, fucking trying to break stories, Astralis stuff, are they corrupt, No, what I'll be remembered for is, this is like putting a big dick in your mouth, isn't it? Like, yeah, that's my contribution to humanity. Thanks. That's esports for you. That's esports. It's garbage, isn't it? It's just fucking garbage. Like, what are we doing, boys? Like, here's the thing. I know what we do now, Nohte.
Man, you've broken the fucking fifth wall.
I have. I went too far now. Yes. What about this, Nohte? You pick a team. Pick a team or a player or a setting. What would you like to talk about as like a big topic? We can end on this one.
All right, give me 1 second.
Like, what's interesting you at the moment? Like, who's are you vibing with, or who are you like out on?
Oh, dude, so now would you want to do Liquid?
We could do Liquid, because the problem is I've recently done sort of like G2 and FaZe and some of the. I haven't talked about Liquid that much though, so yeah, I want to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously we have to say that was a disaster end to their last tournament.
Mate, genuinely, at this point in time, I feel as though literally you could put 5 scarecrows in Astralis jerseys and they would lose to them. Like, it's getting silly now, isn't it? There was no Glaive. The lucky guy, he's lucky to fucking be in that team. What's going on? Like, dude, and then you look at Liquid in this lineup, it's like, you're supposed to be world class. Like, and you were just wrecking like heroic. All like, dude, that was really crazy, wasn't that? When you were watching that game, I bet you couldn't even believe it.
Yeah, honestly. Well, I mean, for the heroic game, we were at Philadelphia, so it's all North American fans sitting there watching Liquid choke this 1v5.
No, but even then, they were so close to winning, So to go from that to losing Liquid, Astralis rather, is mental, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think for this team, I just don't understand what their direction is, because it seems like, personally, from watching Grim play in NA for so long, I know the sort of skill that he has, and I think that he can. I think that he can plug into like a much better role than he is in currently. And obviously, like, you can't. Elige is a hard player to sort of take over any of those roles from. But at this point, they have to change something if they actually want to keep making progress. And it doesn't seem like they really want to like transition Elige out of any of his like regular roles either. So I have a feeling that Grim's just going to take the fall for this team. Like,
you think that's real? Where people there was a rumor like, he was going to get cut for, I can't remember if it's called Zero. They said, there was some rumor that he was going out, right?
As far as I know, that wasn't real.
Yeah, they all said it wasn't, but like, you're implying like that might be the move though, like the real move to make, right?
I think they might make a move where they cut Grim. I just don't know who they would possibly bring in. Like, I don't know if Cold Zero is really the addition to this team.
I mean, apparently he's in call anyway, but yeah, sure.
Well, I think he's also only on a 6-month contract or something anyway.
Yeah, if people don't know, even when he was going to join Furia or whatever the fuck it was, there was that weird angle where it was like, I don't know how. Listen, Cold Zero, you were a brilliant player, but just think how this sounds. You can't go, I'd like to join your new project. I'd like a clause which if anyone better than you asks me to join, I can leave your project. Like, mate, yeah. I think only like Simple could even say that, and even then you'd sort of be like, fuck off, mate, why am I signing you if just waiting for someone better to come? As far as I know, he's sort of done like a half version of that, like he's saying, Call, it's like, I will join but only for 6 months. Like, all right, I guess. So maybe there's a world after the major he could join.
I think there's going to be a lot of roster moves after this major, because it's basically all of these teams that have been waiting for the RMR cycles to finish are going to be making changes, and there's, I think, a couple of contracts that run out at the end of the year. Obviously, Astralis, of course, is known. But on Liquid, this hot potato that they've done with their IGL between Fallen and Stewie for the last basically year is also absurd. Like, I get it to a degree initially when they were trying to swap it out and get a feel for it, but the fact that they've now swapped, I think, 4 times total or something is absurd, because you're never going to establish anything solid with the way. What
I hate about that, it's like, in theory, both of them can be an IGL and have done it and have even been good at it, right? But it's exactly that. It's the fact that they just sort of... I'd have to look up the time span, but I feel like it is every 3 months. It's like they go, starting now... No, now, Now, no, wait. Starting now. It's like, no, it was starting when you made the lineup. Like, these results are all real, they all count. Like, you can't just keep changing and going, but I wasn't the IGL then. Like, no, you were 3 months before. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I agree. Like, why did they not just pick one? Because my assumption, by the way, even though they initially obviously said it wasn't for that, I thought the whole point of getting Fallen was for him to be the in-game leader. Because, like, let's be real. Like, there's another one of those things you're not allowed to say. You're supposed to wait until he does, like, 2 good rounds against Furia. Are we all just going to keep pretending Fallen's like the fucking best AWPer still? It's like he's actually just an okay AWPer at best. And I say okay because he can have big moments, but like he has some games that are shit as well where he gets 12 kills, and he does have the most expensive gun. So in that scenario, it's like, look, mate, no one's hiring you as an AWPer, but I tell you what, as an in-game leader, maybe you can do it. Like you've got all the experience, all that angle. So that's why, to me, the constant swapping in and out, but not kicking anyone. It's like, it just feels like you're spinning your wheels. Or it's like a tactic, like I think firing Moses was like this as well. It's a tactic to just keep the org from cutting one of you. You've got to make some change that sounds like you can do something different,
I maybe you have some insight here, Nohte, because I have no idea. With Adren, they got rid of him because they said that like they wanted someone who could call them out like on their mistakes and whatnot, and like like a fresh pair of eyes. Then they brought Moses in, and he was there for like no time at all. And like when I heard that, I was like, yeah, Moses will definitely call them out. Like he's not afraid to tell people where they're going wrong. But then they're like, oh yeah, we want to go like a different direction. And so I thought like it would be another new pair of eyes, right?
Yes.
Like if that was the whole reason. But then you just bring back the guy that you replaced like mere moments ago, and now the results feel shockingly the same. And I'm not trying to say, oh, it's all Adren's fault, because I think sometimes coaches do get like hung out to dry a bit where they're like, oh, fuck him, it's it's Roban's fault that FaZe out. Fuck me, dude. Like there's only so much a coach can do, and they do a lot of work. But I don't know, like, why would you replace him, bring Moses in, and then go, oh, fucking hell, and then like bring back the old guy? I don't know what that was ever meant to accomplish at any point. Like, what did you decide? Actually, he was a good coach in that time, or like, I don't know. Maybe you have any kind of insight here. Or like,
I just know Adren adds a lot in terms of the amount of background work that he brings to the team, because he does have the tactical base. And when they had Fallen coming in, who is not caught up on the current meta whatsoever, like the way that MIBRSK used to play is not even close to the way that teams currently play. And so he's even said in interviews that he spent the first 4 months in the team basically relearning how to play the game at the current level. And when Adren came in, you could see it in their matches immediately after that they were playing a lot more structurally sound. But even then, when they aired the clips of those when they aired the comms of some of those strategies they were running, Stewie was calling half the in-game like micromanaging stuff as well. Yeah. So it's still Stewie calling mid-round a bunch. So to me, I'm still a little confused as to how they're actually running their system, because it seems like they still have that identity crisis. As far as the coaching change is concerned, I think that the whole balance of having someone to call the players out, Fallen does sort of have that capacity. Right. But the problem is that Fallen doesn't have, like, he's coming into a team that's already a lineup that he's never been on. He's coming into a team where he can't really, I feel like he can't call these players out because he's also trying to learn the game again. And so if they're teaching him how to play, how is he going to then go in and say that you guys are doing this wrong? Right. Like, exactly.
Because otherwise you're just going to end up playing the old style, like, because that's, of course, what you would kind of tend back towards, right? The only way you can say that's wrong is if you're disagreeing from your own standpoint. And if your own standpoint is outdated, then, you would be like getting in the way of progress. No, man, I agree. I really don't know what the, like, when I look at this team, man, I fucking casted that 5v1, like, versus Heroic, which was, by the way, like, I'll just say, I'm a bit of a fan of Liquid. I want them to do well. It was fucking heartbreaking having a cast. It was incredible at the same time, because, like, my God, like, when, within the context of 14-15, a 1v5 at a refresh with a Galil was fucking mind-blowing. But, man, like, watching that, it just feels like, I don't know, man, like this is like the most superstitious team in the world or something. Like they must just get in their own heads. Like, oh no, we're playing up against that team with the red logo again, a red logo and they're Danish. Oh, we can't win. Like everyone hide, just don't fight. Like when and you know, I think whenever you look at like a 5v1 like that, there's only so much like micro analysis you can do of the moves, but there was some stuff in it that just makes no sense. Like, you know, I think it was Fallen facing first from CT where he dies. I can excuse that death because you're 5v1 at that point, and he has just wrecked like 2 people coming in, so he's just taking a fight. Then I can't remember if it was Grim or Elige. It's Elige, yeah, runs through the CT smoke. That's like a very un-Elige like moment, but I think he's just trying to lay the game to rest, right? And it's like this idea of, you know, like being confident and just taking the fight and being there to support the teammates. But then it's like no one else was on that same page. Like he runs through the smoke. You have 2 players backside. Like if anyone swung that while Refresh is looking the other way, he's dead. Like he can't win. But instead, the 2 guys in the site go, no, we're going to hide, because you can feel the round slipping away at that point, right? Like you're in your own head already. You're going, oh my God, like no, just play safe. But fuck me, man. Stewie dies over at dark, and then Naf's like borderline AFK, doesn't even look like he's touching the fucking mouse anymore, like just hidden over at Nuvox. It's like, oh no. And of course Grim wasn't going to win the clutch at that point, you know, like you've just lost the other 4, the game's fucked and you're done. And I don't even know if you can mentally recover from something like that. Like that's not like, you know, the Cadian clutch where, yeah, you know, it's kind of wacky, you know, he knifed you to win the round up against Gambit, but that's a little more forgivable in the sense that, you know, you don't have this big history of choking. You don't have all these eyes on you, like an entire nation looking on. You don't have these, like, you know, like, kind of visions of grandeur for your squad and what it means for NA. Whereas Liquid do, and it happened, and everyone fucking saw it happen, and everyone knows that shouldn't have happened. And so a part of me does wonder if like a roster change is kind of inevitable, just on the basis that they seemingly can't overcome the choking problem. And like you say, I don't think you get rid of someone like Fallen, especially when he's so new and he's a big brand. I don't think you get rid of Stewie, because him and Fallen are integral to the leadership of this team. Naf and Elige are the 2, you know, kind of top performing players right now. So sadly, I think it will be Grim on the chopping block, and I think this guy has so much more to offer. And it's like, I don't even know who you would bring in to actually make the team better if you got rid of Grim. There's no one like on the tip of my tongue and I'm going, oh yeah, they should bring this heavy hitter in from NA. Like, I think you have some of the best players in North America right here, right now, and you still can't make it work. I am kind of still bewildered as well, as you know, you were talking about it earlier. I didn't really get to weigh in, but like the IGL thing between Stewie and Fallen does leave me scratching my head a bit with like how they're both attacking this role together and how it's swapped back and forth so many times. And like whenever you do watch those comm videos, it feels like Stewie's doing the bulk of it. Fallen's given quite a lot of room. But the problem is, like when you're giving Fallen room, in the games where he's feeling it, it looks great, because like it's kind of something to celebrate, like having like this vintage Fallen, you know, landing some cool shots and doing like this wacky stuff. But he feels very inconsistent. And like, especially as we got to the playoffs of Pro League, he did incredible in the groups. He was looking incredible, maybe overselling it a little, but he did good in the groups. He was playing well. And then we get to playoffs, man, and he completely like, he just fumbles it. And it was kind of heartbreaking, because I'm looking at it and I'm going, mate, you're so experienced. You know, like you are the big daddy of Brazilian Counter-Strike. Like you're one of the faces of it, the guy who helped put it on the map. You know, you think that as you get to those high pressure environments, that's where you can get the most out of him. But actually it felt like, with the fucking curse that is Team Liquid, like someone's always destined to have their worst game at the worst time. And so he kind of fell off in the playoffs. Elige had a couple of rough ones as well, which is unlike him. I just want to see Elige succeed. I just want to see Elige do well. And I can imagine that's the sentiment in a lot of NA. Like this guy puts in a lot of work. He's been on Liquid for almost 7 years. Like that is insane, you know? And yeah, you got the Grand Slam victory in there. But, you know, these are like past glories. And this team, I think, still has a lot more to offer. And I don't want to see the hope of NA just fizzle out and go nowhere when they are the team that, like, North America looks to. You're not looking at EG, where it's barely even American anymore. And they're like this kind of, you know, Frankenstein's monster of a team that's been pieced together. And yeah, you've got some up and coming prospects. Even like Bad News Bears are dissolving at the seams, and like that's kind of, you know, really sad. But yeah, man, I want Liquid to do well, not just for the guys in the team, but for the entire region of NA to have someone to actually look to and be like, wow, look at these guys. They're doing it. They're making our region look good again. And that's why it's so heartbreaking that they lost in that 5v1 fashion. And their tournament appearances since have been pretty fucking dire. You know, like they copped the L to Astralis. And like you said, Duncan, it just feels like you could put Scarecrows in Astralis jerseys and they couldn't beat them. Like, I don't know. Does this team just believe in superstition too much or something? Is it like one of those things where subconsciously you're going, okay, guys, as you know, we're 14-5 up. This can't go wrong. As long as we don't let that old choke come back. Oh no! And then it just starts to happen. Like you just will it into existence. I don't know what's wrong with this team, man.
I want to bring it back to what Nohte said actually about Grim, because I feel like that is the stupidest part of this roster the whole time that he's been in the squad. Because remember, they kicked Nitro to bring Grim in, which is what actually sparked the whole Stewie and then later Fallen have to be the IGL, right? Because obviously they traditionally hadn't been doing that role. Like the big problem that kills me about this is the reason you recruited Grim, there's only one reason, is because he was mega hard carrying in Triumph, and he actually made a team that, look, you've seen what the rest of them done, like most of them are just okay. They made them competitive with the absolute best teams in NA. They were going head-to-head with Furia and EG and Team Liquid and Gen G. And so basically what you're telling me is you recruited their star player and then in your team you were like, right, you just do a fucking role because guess what? We've got Elige and we've got NAF. And then later you bring in Fallen as well. It's like, mate, what is the point of that? Like, I don't get that move. Like, in that scenario, shit will get off the pot. If you recruit him because you believe he's a star player, by the way, yes, only an online player, but he certainly appeared to be. He was fucking killing everyone. He was actually bodying loads of those games. In that world, I'm sorry, now the pressure's on people like NAF and Elige. It's like, well, listen, one of you, if you don't perform up to that, this guy gets a go. I don't feel like he ever got a go. I feel like he was always just on the outskirts. And if you know the way power dynamics work in teams, again, it's like the JKS thing I said earlier. If you're Grim, you also don't come in with big balls and go like, all right, Naf, get out the way, I'm taking. Like, that's not, because you're thinking, dude, that guy was like the best player for like the last 3 years in this team, or, you know, Elige was like a fucking MVP all the time. Like, you just don't come in and do that. So unfortunately, I get the feeling like, yeah, logically, if you sort of go through all the logical reasons as to why someone would be kicked or be kept, and a lot of them are reputation based, obviously, he will just be the player kicked. But the problem is this, I'll tell you right now, Team Liquid, fucking mark this date right here if you kick him, and just listen, because this prophecy will come true. He will leave the team, he will go to like Extra Salt or something like that, or maybe, by the way, if you're unlucky, someone like Complexity maybe picks him up if he wants to go to Europe or whatever. He goes to some other good team, they'll put him in a star role, and you'll look like an actual dickhead, because you'll be with whoever the fuck, maybe you do get cold zero or something, but he will be fragging out of control, and then everyone will just think, why doesn't a good team sign him, and it won't be your team? And so basically you'll have just wasted your whole and you'll have never found out in your team if he could do it. Because here's the other thing, they've had that long dude that if they'd have just brought him in and given him like a load of roles initially that he could do, you'd also have found out just during the online era if he could play like that or not. If he'd have shit the bed after 3 months, you know, you say, okay, we tried the experiment, didn't work. I feel like they're going to leave him essentially on the table, and they'll never even know what they had. Like, was he actually good enough to do it, or wasn't he? I don't know from this team, because like, I look at him in the game, I agree with you, I don't think they use him at all the way he was using Triumph.
They don't at all. Like, I think he has most of his CT roles or something, -2, which overlapped with Elige, and then his T roles are entirely different. Or maybe it's the other way around, actually. Sorry, his CT roles are entirely different. So yeah, they don't use him the same whatsoever. And I actually talked to Sheikh Zula, his old in-game leader on Triumph at Philadelphia, and he's just like, yeah, they're not using him correctly whatsoever. So it's not even like just from based on watching them myself, from talking to players who've played with them before, they're saying they're not using him correctly, and it's very evident when watching their matches as well.
Oh,
like, you're not going to go and stick Nico. You're not going to go and stick Nico and Pit on Inferno or BAPS Mirage. Like, it's just an absurd waste of talent.
Because the other thing is as well, like, when the question is, who do they get? Like, listen, I get it if they get cold zero, because if you think about it, right, they've all lost to him loads, and then Stewie and Fallen are obviously, like, fucking his best pals in a stupid way, you know, as in they just like him and they want him in the team, all that jazz. Right, I get that angle. But my problem is this, if it isn't cold zero, well, there's a world where they might just get an NA player, right? Have you learned nothing? Like, if you then go and get OC, Fang. It's like, that's just what you did with Grim. They can't then come in because everyone knows the classic example is NIP, right? NIP, no joke, was like, right, we've got 4 of the greatest players of all time, and then you're just doing whatever's left. And everyone who joined the team, it's like joining, you're just the janitor. I thought I was going to be part of the team, in business meetings. Like, nah, just clean up the trash and take that out. And then at the end, when your stats are shit because you're just doing all the worst roles, things you never did in your other team, they then just go, your stats are a bit like him, we're going to have to replace you. And then they just bring the next guy in. The next guy's like an AWP. And again, it's like, there's all your roles. It's like, dude, eventually you have to like change the core of the team, don't you? You can't just keep it can't always be the 5th player. I mean, logically, he's not even in the team. So I feel as though, unless it's literally like a game changer, they'll just do the same thing again because there's something fundamental about that team where some of them do just feel like they've got their set defined roles. But if the team doesn't win, surely those can't be the roles. You got to switch it up, Yeah,
I don't even think coldzera would work on this team because there'd be too many voices trying to guide it. You have Fallen, Stewie, and Elige, who are all already big voices on this team doing mid-round calls and adaptions. coldzera does the exact same thing. It's just going to be way too much. It's going to be 4 cooks in the kitchen, essentially, every round.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I've just been, I was having a look at like the theoretical ideas, but it led me down a very different route.
Do you have
so
someone?
I hope it's all right to just 180 the conversation. But I was looking at big Brazilian AWPers, and it led me down this route of Furia and like what's going on there. Obviously, they just moved Drop into this team, right? And that's from Furia Academy. He looked all right there, he was playing quite well, and obviously they wanted to have a replacement. But my like pick for the next Brazilian up and coming AWPer is probably Safi, I think is how you say it. Mate, this guy looks incredible, and I really want nothing more than for him to have a shot in this Furia team, because even when Honda first joined and we had this whole thing where when Honda played back at Blast and Art was donning the AWP, I think it was Gary came out in an interview and said, we don't actually like it when Art is AWPing. We would rather have him on his role and rifling. And he is a good secondary AWPer, but I don't think he works well because obviously Art's whole style is like up in your face, and that doesn't really work as well when you're donning the AWP. I want them to have a good AWP. Obviously, Junior, that whole move, it was like a big risk, I think, when they did it. And I think, it was one where if it worked, it would have been really cool, but it was perhaps always leaning towards failure, right? Like going into a team, everyone having to learn to speak in your language. You're learning a completely different system. Furia is not an easy system to just slot into. It took this team years to figure out how they wanted to play their brand. But I really want them to get Safi, man. And that's no shade to Drop. He looked pretty good in Furia Academy, but that's an academy team. And I get you want to train people up. But man, like this Safi guy, he's 26 years old, so in a way, maybe getting towards the end of like where you could have like his best performances.
His numbers are bonkers though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it feels like it would be such a shame if he never even got that chance to like be in a team like this, because he is a very explosive AWPer. He's fucking unreal, man. I've seen this guy do some next level stuff. And I would love it because it means that you get Art back on rifling. He can be up in their faces. He can don that secondary AWP, but he still has all the freedom of being that, highly aggressive IGL. I think you've got really good pieces still in this team, but they're close. They're like teetering on the edge to the Team Liquid problem of like always it just being the 5th man's fault, or like the NIP of old, where I'm worried that they're just going to be endlessly bringing in new faces to try and like reignite the glory days. And really, if you look at it, I don't think Drop's the answer. And obviously, he was on the academy team, so there's the idea of like it's a quick plug-and-play replacement that you can try and build up. But I don't think you're going to be able to mold him into a tier 1 player super quickly.
On that note, even when they added Drop, I think they said in their announcement that he's not their 5th. They said that they're using him temporarily and continuing their search for a 5th as well. So they're still technically looking for another player. I think for me, I think Safe stylistically fits this team way better than Junior did, because they picked up Junior, who's an AWPer who very much goes for his own plays and has his own way of playing the game as well. Like he did not have the same freedom he had on Triumph as on this team, and it did not work whatsoever in their system. Safe can fit into that a lot better. Like you're taking over for Henwon, who's a far more experienced, tenured player who can fill in the sort of gaps that Furia need him to. You're going to Junior, who doesn't have that experience to actually support Art in a lot of these a lot of his plays. But again, I think the safe problem is we might be in the same scenario as the whole Virtus.pro CIS debacle, where these contracts for Brazilian teams are also a nightmare with buyouts. Yeah. So I have a feeling that we're locked into that same situation where these players might have such an exponentially high buyout that they're just looking to their academy rosters at this point.
If people don't know, that guy TRK who got to join MIBR and then was in the other MIBR now is sort of like actually fucking funnily enough benched, even though he bought himself out of MIBR, so that was a bit of an own. Right, that guy was in Team 1 and had a result at like WESG like 2018 or something. He was in the team, it took him 2 years to get out of his contract and go to join like a bigger team. Even though at the time he also had like, I mean mainly in Brazil, but he had like mad numbers, he was obviously the main guy, he performed at this international LAN. It's just apparently if you went and inquired like MIBR did a bunch of times, yeah, they would just tell you something mental like, oh, like give us 150k. It's like, well, he hasn't even played yet, what? You know, and so it, like at the time it was just, it was out of pocket. So but I agree, this is like a rare example. It's actually funny his name, yeah, it's like suppose you apparently pronounce safe. It's funny his name is that because it does look like the most safe pick you can ever need. Yeah. In AWPer, he's mad, he's like really skilled and his numbers are like basically someone has to give him a try. He can't just stay in pain gaming, you know, with this numbers. Like someone's got to give him one crack, just like Grim and Triumph. Like it demands it when you're that good individually compared to the level of competition. And people are going to think like, yeah, but there's no one left in NA. The people who are left, there are still some names, and then he tortures them all of them. So, like, I think, yeah, I agree. That would be a pretty decent pickup. The problem with Furia is they went from being one of the coolest teams in the world to watch because they had everyone had, like, the right role on the team. They had mega unique stats. It's like the Virtus.pro story again. You have to play him 15 times before you figure out how to play him and what the fuck Art's doing because he really is just, like, coming up with that shit on the fly. But then the problem is, it wasn't their choice, but just that bizarre chemistry where Henny has to leave and go and play with his brother at certain times, like the fucking Call of the Moon or something, you know. And he has to show, where's he gone? Oh, where the fuck's he? You know, like a werewolf or some shit. I don't know why he has to do that, because those guys, like, mate, they have just played God with so many rosters in the Brazil. Them and KNG, like, you came through like a wrecking ball, motherfucker. What have you done with this scene? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many teams you've just bodied for just, and then also that whole thing of like, we just love to party and that. Like, why are you saying that publicly and put it on Instagram? Like, let's pretend to practice. Because, dude, when they were taking time off for those few months, the brothers, I remember looking on their Instagram and like, it was just like non-stop parties and stuff. Like, we not working out, are you? Like, what are these photos? Anyway, it's not like FNX where it's just all photos of him in SK Gaming about 5 years ago. It's like, why are you posting that in 2020? Like, I might come back, fans. Never will, of course. But anyway, basically, the problem is when Henny left, they never managed to replace him. Now I think it's even worse. Like, there's no way you chose to put Art as the AWPer. Like, that's like some desperation shit. And in doing so, he was the soul of your team, mate. You sort of just like killed what was cool about Fury. Now you're just a team. You're not terrible because, listen, if you have Kserato and fucking Yuri, you can't be bad. But the problem is, I agree, they are just in the Team Liquid spot where it's like they could upset someone. They could play a top team close. But if it's like an international LAN, they're not going to the final. They're not winning the tournament. And by the way, the Furia last year, I know they came to Blast at the end of the year and everyone hyped them and they sort of failed. There was a period where I really believed they could have actually had like a miracle run. They could have made like a final of the big tournament. They could have beat like the top teams in the world, you know. They looked like they could do it at one point.
In NA, it wasn't even close. Like, it was almost kind of embarrassing, like how like you would have all like these big names, you know, like your Team Liquids, your 100 Thieves at that point in time, and they'd be making finals versus Fury, and Fury would fucking bang them out like it was casual. It would just be like, oh, okay, well, that's over. And so it looked like they were like these undisputed kings of NA, and then they went over to Europe, and then obviously it was like, oh, it was really ugly, you know, debut at that Blast. But man, I was still so hopeful. And the thing about this Furia squad is, like you say, man, the style that they play is so exciting. Like, there's nothing like it, you know. And so when it's working, oh my, does it look good. And that's the one difference between them and VP is, like, when VP style's working, it's a lot of waiting, it's a lot of nothing, and then like final 20 seconds something happens. But when Furia style is working, mate, it's like you're watching someone like do a playthrough of like a single player game where it's all on rails and you're just fucking shooting everything that moves, you know, like, oh, I am the fucking law, you know, like, and you're just popping motherfuckers left and right. That's what Furia are, man. And it was so sick, and they had all these nifty ideas. Like, it was them them who showcased that triple boost on Vertigo versus 100 Thieves.
Yes.
I think that was New York right at the end of the year. Man, like they had so many little like cool pieces, and they're also like a really nice team to have, you know, in interviews and on camera. Like they're a very sound group of dudes there. So it was really, really great seeing them do well. And then I think the Henny departure did just hit them so hard, you know, like because suddenly I think it took so long to even get this team to work. Like, if you remember, Art used to get kind of ridiculed for his style early on in this Furia squad. It was like, what's this guy even doing?
Everyone thought it was a gimmick, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and then it like hit that like golden kind of moment where like it all fell into place, and like suddenly, you know, the secrets of the world were revealed to him, and he like knew exactly what to do, the timings to hit. And bro, it looked beautiful, and we haven't really seen a team play like that ever before. So it was so exciting. And that's why I want them to get like a strong AWPer, like a safe character, where he is someone who already is very aggressive with how he AWPs. So hopefully you can try and initiate him into the whole thing a little easier, because I don't want that to be the end of it. I don't want to go, wow, they looked really good online for a big while, and then everything died when Lands came back. You know, I want this team to be like the next faces of Brazilian Counter-Strike. That's another weird thing as well. It feels like, you know, the Brazilians are very, very keen to get behind you know, like the O Nation team. I don't actually know how to pronounce the name, but I'm pretty sure that
I think it is just 00 Nation.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
An awful name, by the way.
Yeah, so 00 Nation, you know, like they really want to get behind those guys. But man, like I don't think, you know, you can't forget about your Furias or even your Pain Gamings, man. Like these are some legit squads that can do damage. And I think if you mush together Pain Gaming and Furia a little bit, you could have something delicious there. Also, while we're on the topic of like Portuguese and Brazilian Counter-Strike, someone who's neither of those things but speaks one of them, Malbs MD. I love this guy. I don't know if you guys are big Malbs fans, but I'm a big Malbs
Very good
fan.
player.
Yeah, he's great, man. The fact that he's 18, learned a whole different language just to play, like did the Elige where you learn Portuguese just to slot in. Like that's an incredible work ethic for someone who's 18 years old. And the guy is like very, very good in the server. I would love to see what he could do at like a higher level than Team One.
I mean, just quickly on one more note, like I feel like Furia not having a proper fifth, like safe or a player who's going to be on there permanently is just such a waste, because Queserado's form right now is bonkers.
Yeah.
His play at EPL was actually incredible. It's half the reason they even made the run that they did.
Yes.
So it's just an absolute waste that he's playing this well. Even Yuri's also playing really well. So I think the whole fact that they're just wasting that is a little bit.
Kris, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and special thanks go out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs? Do you want teasers? Who's going to be the guests on my next interviews? Do you want to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skoluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.